Good evening. Today is Thursday, February 27th, 2025. This is the Council Rock Education Committee meeting. My name is Nicole Khan. I'll be facilitating this evening. We will start with roll call and starting to my right.
Yota Palis.
Danielle Respis, IT.
Tech integration, or Matt McCarthy, tech integration.
Tracy Oseki, School Board.
Linda Stone, School Board.
Ann Horner, School Board.
Good evening, Al Funk, Director of Secondary Education.
Nicole Crawford, Director of Elementary Education.
Andy Sanko, Superintendent.
Michael Roosevelt, School Board. Bob Hickey, School Board.
Oh, Andrew Mendel, Director of Communications.
Raj Ray, Director of HR.
I believe. Thank you. Do we have anyone on the phone calling in this evening? Okay. We, in attendance over here are visiting presenters? Okay. Can you? Thank you.
Tam Gary, Supervisor of Curriculum Instruction.
Kyle Kaner, Supervisor of Autistic Support.
All right, thank you. I know Mr. Tate is here. I think he just stepped out for a second. So I believe we can get started. So Mrs. Crawford, Mr. Funk?
Thank you, Ms. Khan.
Thank you.
Before we dive in, just a reminder that for the most accurate and reliable information concerning our district, please refer to resources, websites, and social media platforms managed by the Council Rock School District. We advise the community to exercise caution when relying on the accuracy of social media and ask the community to verify any social media content with the district for accuracy. If you question what you are seeing, need a fact check, or additional details on the matter, please reach out to the district directly. Our contact information, is readily available on our website at www.crsd.org.
All right, I would just like to acknowledge Mr. Hidalgo just walked in, and then Mr. Tate had stepped out and is back in. So here we are. Thank you.
All right, so tonight's agenda, we're going to start off with full-day kindergarten. I know Mrs. Crawford, Mr. Spring, and Mr. Francis have gone around to all the elementary schools. I think they lovingly refer to it as the full-day kindergarten roadshow, so I think you're going to get a taste of that to kick off our evening. Then we're pleased to have Mrs. Tammy Gary, our Supervisor of Curriculum Instruction, going to talk to you a little bit about a curriculum management system that we are interested in procuring, titled Atlas. Then we have Dr. Kyle Cantor here with us this evening. Thank you, Kyle. And he's going to give us an update on special education matters. And then finally, I will be discussing both the high school schedule and late start times. So with that, Mrs. Crawford.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And I'm going to begin by sharing a little bit about the communication that went out earlier this evening, our SWAY communication that Mrs. Mangold has spoken about in previous meetings. And actually, I'm going to turn it over to her because already she has some great information and feedback about the amount of people who have viewed it.
So one of the things that premised the whole full day kindergarten is getting the word out to the community. It really matters the amount of people we reach with the news, because when you think about it, many of those people do not have children in their district. They really don't have any connection to find out. They're not on our Facebook page. They're not our social media friends or anything like that. So we have started, I think we started last summer, just putting the word out there. It's coming in little dribs and drabs. And recently, we've really been amping it up and boosting it on Facebook posts, Instagram posts, and through the regular use of what we call BDCOM. It's like a mass emailing system. It's our mass notification system. So that being said, one thing of note, we have now exceeded, just keep in mind, it's a school district. It's, we're not Taylor Swift or anything. We have over 10,000 followers now on Facebook, which is pretty good considering 18 months ago we had 10. We did not have many. Anyway, so that being said, of those 10,000 followers, we had 36,000 hits already on this SWAY that was published maybe 3 or 4 hours ago. So what we did was we boosted it. We talked about that last time there was an education committee about boosting it. So what you do is you pay a little bit, it's not a lot, but the way the algorithm works within Facebook and where they place an image of the ad or some language. They try and target groups that they think might be interested. So I did a geographic target. So it's like a, I don't know, 20-mile radius of Council Rock. And so that's where the message went. So that's, well, we also sent 12,730 more emails. Each time I hit that mass notification system, that's how many people are receiving it. And that's 87% delivery rate. And the reason it's only 87%, actually that's pretty good because a lot of them get bounced back. People have an incorrect or changed their email address. So the communications for full day kindergarten are clearly going out. The chance to register, registration's been open as soon as registration was open. We just kind of pushed it out there. So I would say since December, we've had a full court press just trying to get the word out. And it's working because it's neat when Mrs. Crawford has her stakeholder groups, you have like young moms there who aren't parents in the district yet. I'm going to tell my friends and I'm going to tell them, and that's exactly what we need, that word of mouth. So the communication is working and it's pretty well saturated at this point.
Thank you, Andrea. And also, we want to give a shout out to Matt McCarthy, who was a part of doing the video that's embedded in the SWAY communication that went out this evening. Doesn't like when we point that out, but that was a huge help and very well done. So thank you, both of you, for that. So as Ms. Mangold shared, we've had our ongoing stakeholder meetings. There will be 5 total that we will hold for full day kindergarten. We have an outstanding group of parent and community members that come together, and Ms. Gary is an important part of that work too, and several kindergarten teachers, Ms. Mangold is there. And we share information and update this group about full day kindergarten. But most importantly, we're asking for their feedback. We're asking for their perspective. As she just shared that members of this committee, there are some that are future parents, current parents, and parents that had students go through Council Rock School District many years ago. So it's a really great group. It's been a wonderful experience. Our 3rd meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, March 25th. And we continue to look forward to engaging that group with the work. So this is technically our 11th roadshow, if you want to count Chancellor. We have had 10 roadshows previous to this evening, and as we've shared, this was very important to us to be able to get in front of our teachers and staff and share important information related to full day kindergarten. Many updates have come by way of email to our staff and to our buildings, but there were 2 particular topics that we felt it was important to have key members of our planning team get in front of the buildings to be able to share about and get their feedback and answer any questions. And those 2 topics this evening, we're talking about the elementary schedule that's now impacted with the addition of full day kindergarten, as well as staffing. Those 2 topics impact everyone in a building, so we thought it was important to go out to every building and share this information. A part of the roadshow, we had Tammy Gary. Tonight we have Mr. Bob Francis, our principal of Newtown Elementary School, who does our master scheduling at the elementary level. So he's going to do a deep dive and share a little bit about the process that went into building what we believe to be a quality product. And we've received very positive feedback across all 10 elementary schools and the stakeholder groups that we worked with. In addition, we have Mr. Ron Spring, our Human Resources Director, who's going to speak about the staffing process and what that looks like and sounds like this year with full day kindergarten coming on board. And I do want to acknowledge Ms. Lindsay Pekowski from the Human Resources team, who also was out at each building with us for the roadshows. So before I turn it over to Mr. Francis, we do believe it's important to point out that as a part of the process for planning for a full day kindergarten schedule as well as an elementary schedule, this work has taken about 6 months. As soon as we learned that we needed to plan for full day kindergarten, we decided to look as a team at many different models of surrounding districts and their full day kindergarten schedules. Then Bob, as he does very well, began looking at ways that we can create several options that could potentially work here in Council Rock. Most importantly, after some of these options were developed, we as a team got in front of many different stakeholder groups to get feedback. That consisted of meeting with teachers, staff, curriculum coordinators, specialists, administrators, principals, and CREA leadership. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Bob, and he's going to share a little more specifically about the framework. Bob?
Thanks for having me tonight, everyone. So obviously our largest charge is most of our day is currently planned around 6th grade levels because kindergarten's a half-day program. So we had to figure out how to plan that 7th grade level into a full day schedule with lunches, recesses, and special during the day. So the place where we started was with lunch, and you'll see up on the screen above you, they are denoted by the green. So we started with lunch and gaining information from the business department. Pennsylvania State requires that students at the elementary level are served lunch prior to 2 p.m. So we used that 2 p.m. guideline. We built 15 minutes in front of that so that staff would have enough time to get whichever grade level is that last lunch in the cafeteria through the line. And then the kids would be able to be at the tables and finish lunch, even if it's after 2 p.m. But that 15 minutes would allow the serving line to be done by 2 p.m. We then piggyback the other 6 grade level lunches in front of that. And you can see that it has lunches starting at the elementary level at 10:45 in the morning and then running and finishing at 2:15 in the afternoon. From there, we began to look at the 30-minute recesses that happen for each of the grade levels. Currently, kindergarten doesn't have that 30-minute time slot, but with them now staying for lunch, they'll gain that 30-minute recess that happens for the other primary grade levels as well. So there's 2 different models that you see. One model runs on the top of the schedule, and the other model runs on the bottom of the schedule. The reason that you see 2 different ones is that different elementary schools, they run a recess before lunch model, and at other schools they run a lunch before recess model. So what the model shows you up there is that regardless of which model they currently run, if they want to stay consistent with it, it can fit into the day. So you see on the top that 30-minute recesses would begin at 10:15 for whatever that 1st grade level is that has lunch. And then vice versa at the bottom, if you are a school that has lunch before recess, you can see that the recesses still fit in where they happen in the 30 minutes following lunch. On either side of those bright blue blocks that you see at the top and the bottom are 15-minute time increments. Those are the orange blocks that you see. And those are 7 different options during the school day that the principals and school teams could use to plan in those primary additional second recesses. So we don't need 7 blocks, we only need 4, 1 for kindergarten through 3rd grade. But having the 7 blocks gives a little bit of flexibility for the school team to be able to plan around other parts of the day and then to be able to build in the academic schedule for the kids as far as the classroom instruction goes. If you then go to the beginning and end of day, you will see arrival and dismissal are the bright yellow blocks. One thing that pretty much every stakeholder group that we talked to wanted to hold on to was to make sure that we keep that morning meeting for kids at the elementary level. So you can see after arrival at 9:10, there is a 20-minute block that runs until 9:30 for morning meeting at every grade level. That allows students to begin their day in the classroom with their homeroom teacher, to have those conversations, to get started on some morning activity, some morning work, to be able to sit down and have that morning discussion, and to get their day started. In doing that, some of the other requests of stakeholders and things that we worked through were having specials begin at 9:30 and not earlier than that so that we could hold on to that morning meeting time. And then also making sure that specials at the end of the day ended by 3:30 so that students could also end their day in their homeroom classroom and be able to be dismissed from that place where they started their day. We then went into looking at the specials areas. So typically right now we run a 6-day special, 6-period special schedule during a day. Kindergarten periods for those half-day programs are planned in for a half-hour worth of time that typically happen on a day when another grade level has a limited number of sections and there's an opening in the schedule, and that would be when kindergarten gets their special. With kindergarten coming on full day, that model wasn't going to work because of the number of sections that we'll carry at the different buildings, and we won't have enough openings in the days to be able to plan in each of those specials. So we explored a couple different models to be able to get every one of those grade levels. There are 5 specials during the week. As Mrs. Crawford said, we went through many models, probably 10 or 12 different models to get to what you're looking at today. We explored doing things on a 6-day rotating schedule. and trying to work that out. And the things that we found were we lost consistency for students because they didn't have special at the same time every day. They didn't get to, see their other peers going at the same time that they were going at. It also lost consistency for our teachers that used that period of time during the day to be able to meet with each other, to talk about kids and to plan. So we ended up moving away from that and going back to trying to figure out how do we plan 7 specials periods into a school day at the elementary level. Currently, our grade levels 1 through 6 have a 45-minute special. If you try to plan 7 45-minute blocks into that day and still get the prep and lunch for a specialist, you cannot plan the 45-minute periods in. So we had to work through and we had to figure out how are we going to be able to do that. The other request that came from many of the stakeholder groups is you can see in between the lighter blue blocks that are representing our specials are 5-minute blocks of time. So those 5-minute blocks of time were requested from the many stakeholders as to we need that 5 minutes so that one grade level is leaving the special and the other grade level is showing up. It's not happening simultaneously. There's a little bit of transition time in between there so that you don't have 2 classrooms worth of kids all in the same room at the same time. It gives one grade level a chance to move out of the room, the teacher gets set, and it gives the next grade level an opportunity to come in. So in between each of those specials, we held on to a 5-minute transition time, but then we needed to figure out how are we going to make those specials work. So we went back to the developmentally appropriate conversation, which Mrs. Crawford alluded to, and we ended up taking a look at the primary area, and we looked at those specials and made them 40-minute special blocks to fit that into the day so that we can get the 7 periods. So you see in the front half of the day, there are 3 45-minute special blocks. Those would be for our 4th through 6th graders. They're not labeled per grade level because it then gives the building principal and building team the ability to move those grade levels around so that they can make the schedule consistent throughout the day. And then in the afternoon, you'll see that there are 4 40-minute blocks, and those would be for our kindergarten through 3rd graders, our primary grade levels. And again, they're not labeled specifically because it does give that flexibility for scheduling at the building level for making sure that that consistency stays for each of the grade levels. So with some of the changes that you saw in the previous slide, specials times for our primary grade levels, as well as one of the other items that's come up consistently in conversation is we currently have a 25-minute WIN or intervention period at the elementary level for each of our grade levels. And what we've learned through the MTSS process and the implementation that we're doing with that is, in order to provide the best interventions for our students, most of the research-based things that we're implementing with them need at least 30 minutes consistently for them to be able to show the progress and for us to properly implement those programs. So we really wanted to be able to move to a 30-minute intervention block all the way across the entire elementary level from kindergarten through 6th grade. So you'll see in the middle of this slide some updated minutes that show that we changed the time for WIN periods from 25 to 30 minutes. That period was a little bit easier to work out at the primary grade levels. And it was easier because we just used their special time and we moved it to 40 minutes from 45. So we were able to put that 5 minutes right into the intervention time. Other than that, the only difference in the primary grade level minutes that you'll see is the social studies and science area in kindergarten, which they are developing, is going to be called Play Lab. And the Play Lab curriculum needs a 35-minute block of time for them to be able to implement that new curriculum with the kindergarten kids. So what we wanted to be able to do was to keep that consistent across all of the primary grade levels. So you'll see that we made the adjustment to grades 1 through 3 as well, so that it's consistent all the way across. If you then take a look at grades 4, 5, and 6, they did not have the adjustment to their specials time. So we did not gain that 5 minutes anywhere in their academic minutes. So we worked alongside the ELA and math coordinators at the elementary level. And with the fact that we will be using that intervention time to address items in both math and ELA, we were able to borrow 5 minutes dependent upon the grade level to be able to get those 5 minutes in so that we can really really use that intervention time for its best use. The final visual that you see here is a mock schedule. This is none of the school's schedules. This is just really a visual that we use to be able to show you guys, as well as the teaching staffs at each of the elementary schools, that all of the minutes that we've gone through fit into the day for the kids, regardless of what grade level it is, based on each of the adjustments that we made. So that includes the 7 lunch periods, the 7 30-minute recess periods. It includes a 15-minute additional recess for grades kindergarten through 3. It shows the adjustments to each of the intervention periods, which are orange up there to show 30 minutes worth of time. And then it will also show the adjustment of social studies at the primary grade levels to 35 minutes, as well as the adjustment for the primary specials to 40 minutes worth of time. Outside of that, the only thing that really stands out up here that's very different is if you take a look at 6th grade. So currently we are piloting at some of the schools the departmentalization of 6th grade. So we left it as 4 60-minute blocks, so that we can just demonstrate that regardless of whether 6th grade is departmentalized or whether they say self-contained, we can still plan the core subject areas into those 60-minute blocks of time to make sure that they're getting everything academically that they need throughout their day.
Thank you. Mr. Spring?
Great, so Mr. Francis is definitely a hard act to follow, especially doing it 10 times, but obviously we all learned a lot. I learned a lot from him, being primarily a secondary person, so it's been great to get to see all his hard work. I'm just going to talk briefly about staffing and what I've shared with our staff at the schools during the various roadshows. The main thing I emphasize to the staff is our process isn't really changing, but it's being started much, much earlier because of the need to hire so many staff members or new teachers. One of the things we did early on is we sent out a survey to all the teachers at all the schools to say, who's interested in teaching full-day kindergarten? So if you're not currently a kindergarten teacher, would you be interested in moving grade levels to teach full-day kindergarten now that it's being offered? And we got a great response back. And that really provided a basis for our principals to now look at their staff and see who is the best fit for each position in their building, regardless of grade level, to make sure that we have the best person in every spot. So as we discussed earlier, we're looking at prospectively we're projecting 17 new kindergarten teachers. And how we got that number, as we discussed, was we looked at our projected 1st grade full-time enrollment, thinking that now that we'll have full-day kindergarten, those numbers would be similar to full-day 1st grade. And that came up with 17 teachers. One of the things we wanted to really focus on was giving our staff, we have great teachers, we have great support staff, we wanted to give our teachers first opportunity to move to those positions if they so chose. As long as, obviously, the principal felt that it was the right fit for students. And the principals and staff, the excitement was really there. We've filled almost all of our full-day kindergarten projected positions just based on internal staff. Principals, usually we wait till June, till we have our June enrollment numbers, to have these conversations about moving staff, about number of sections. Principals have already started those. So we're really in great shape. We are currently looking to post for open positions that we know of starting next week. Again, we usually wait till after June, but we're projecting the need. And those are primarily the positions where we have, say, a 2nd grade teacher wanted to move to kindergarten. The principal felt it was the best fit. The principal moved that teacher. Now we have to backfill that 2nd grade. And it's important to start early because we like to call it the domino effect. Now that that second grade position is open, and say we post for it, again, our staff is second to none. Sometimes they want to move. We may hire one of our staff members for that position, maybe from another building. Well, now we have to fill that position. So now we have to post for that position for at least 2 weeks, and so on and so forth. And there's times one open position can lead to 3, 4 different postings over several months. So we want to make sure that we have everyone in, we have all the positions filled by the start of the school year. We are currently going to be engaging in virtual job fairs we've registered for, in-person job fairs. We've reached out to many of the universities statewide, both local and further. An example, for instance, Penn State, a lot of our local students go to Penn State. We want them to have that opportunity as well. We want them to be aware of these opportunities. So we're continuing to work as a team to see what other positions we may need moving forward. But it's been a really positive experience working with all the full-day kindergarten team. I'll give a shout out to Jim Kincaid from CREA. He's been really helpful as well, working with us as a team. So we're excited, the staff is excited, and we're looking forward to be able to fill all those other positions as well.
Great, thank you. And at this time, we'll take any questions you may have.
Oh, sorry, I just wanted to acknowledge Ms. Stone had come in earlier, but I have to roll call, so I wanted to acknowledge her, I believe.
No,
Oh, were you here?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
I'm sorry, my apologies. Okay.
Okay.
Ms. Horner?
Thank you. There's a lot of work going into full-day kindergarten. You guys are doing a lot. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of new resources, right? So scheduling, understand, it's a lot of moving pieces. Hiring, domino effect on that, right? We also have our enrollment that we got. How do we stand with our districting and everything with this enrollment coming in with all those elementary schools?
We're watching those numbers very closely. Dr. Sanko and I were just recently talking about the numbers as they stand today versus previous years, and we both believe, and the principals as well, they do not look any higher or lower than where we normally are at this time, at this stage. We typically see a burst in enrollment and registrations happening as you get closer to June. So we are doing our best to try to forward think as much as possible, but of course, we're monitoring every month, and we'll keep the board apprised of those numbers at the first of every month as well.
Okay, good. And then my other thing is, are we on point to be ready for 25-26? Do we feel that we're on that schedule?
We do. That's a question that comes up almost at every stakeholder meeting that we have, because the group is very excited about full-day kindergarten, and in those conversations, they'll just continue to say, are we on point? Are we on track? And the answer is always the same. We do believe that we are. There are always obstacles that we may not know about, and our team knows, and the many in the buildings, there will be obstacles that we encounter, even with the best of planning this spring, that I've no doubt with our team and our support will continue to navigate. But right now, we do feel that we're on track for the launch in fall 2025.
Good job, because it's a lot of work. It's a lot.
It's a team effort. A lot of people, many in this room, outside of this room, each of the buildings, central office principals, et cetera. Everyone's been really working hard. We appreciate it.
Good. Thank you.
Mr. Tate?
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Crawford. Thank you, Mr. Spring. Thank you, Mr. Francis. I appreciate it. I've always appreciated the enthusiasm around full-day kindergarten among the staff. I think it's exciting, and I think the amount of work that's gone into it is commensurate with what's a pretty heavy lift, but I think it's a really great benefit. There was one thing that jumped out at me that I wanted to ask about. Mr. Francis, is in adjusting the schedule, the intervention block increased from 25 to 30 minutes, which obviously seems really valuable if that can work. There were other adjustments in the schedule, particularly in the upper grades, correct? Would you just highlight a couple of other significant schedule adjustments?
Yeah, so the real adjustment that was made in the upper grades, the only change that you'll see in the upper grades is if you look at the language arts or mathematics minutes. So in 6th grade, the language arts minutes previously were 120, and because we'll be using part of that intervention time for those ELA interventions, we were able to move and work with the language arts department to put that 5 minutes in the intervention time, and they'll still have the time that they need with their program to be able to get through it in the 115 minutes that's still in their regular day. And then in the 4th and 5th grade level, we worked with the elementary math coordinator. So they had 80 minutes of math there, and 60 minutes of those are their regular instruction during a day, and the other minutes that they use in math are for Number Corner. Number Corner is also something that a lot of our teachers incorporate as part of their morning meeting. So we were able to use that 5 minutes from math and to bump that down so that we got the additional 5 minutes into the intervention time.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Ms. Polly?
Just want to agree with Mrs. Crawford at the last stakeholder meeting. I've never seen the parents so excited, and they were like, are we really gonna have full day kindergarten? And they were asking, like, really excited. So it was one of these situations where you really feel good to be in the room with the parents and share their excitement, and also the confirmation from the administration that we are on the right path to offer an incredibly fun program, because I think I want to go back to kindergarten after seeing some of the stuff that you are preparing to do. So thank you.
Mr. Roosevelt and Mr. Hickey?
Thank you. So just stay on that schedule for a second, because that's going to be relevant. Part of
So I know the first one.
the one that we were just looking at, that one, there we go. So this discussion brought a couple things to my mind. The first one regarding enrollment. Do we know what the average enrollment of kindergartners for the past 3 years is? Or I'm sure if we don't know it now, it can be obtained.
Yeah, we can get it. I don't have those
Okay.
numbers.
All right, it was just something that I thought about. And coming back to this, I do think this is an interesting juggling element. For grades 4 through 6, there is, 4 and 5 and 6, there's a little bit difference in those two columns. But in all of these, K through 6, there's more time in language arts than there is mathematics. I believe, I could be incorrect, but I believe from looking at our scores, typically, don't we score, or don't the kids score better in language arts than they do in mathematics?
I don't know if we can draw that conclusion
Sure, okay.
right now, but I think Tammy is also here that can speak to the minutes. She's been an important part of, working with the coordinators, looking at these minor revisions.
It kind of leads into, I'm presenting after this in regards to curriculum,
Okay.
but it has to really look at the standards of what you're doing. So your early literacy is your strong point,
Yeah.
because even with math, the students have to be able to read to understand. So the basic numeracy things are counting and the skills that go into learning kind of how to quantify. You switch, you kind of see by grade 3 is kind of your line of demarcation for ELA, where instead of the early grades you're learning how to read, you're switching to content and using reading to learn. So that's why you'll see a shift in minutes. You also see the shift in math, but going into 4, 5, and especially 6 is where math really starts to take off. So you'll have students in 6th grade doing Algebra 1. So it shifts from early reading to the focus of math comes later. So when you're looking at the minutes for everything, you're looking at building concepts and computation in the younger grades. But as you get, especially in the 4th, 5th, you're looking at pre-algebra skills where it's more complex learning for the time. So it's kind of that comparison is like first one then the other, it's not like the same. So even when you look at your programs, you'll usually see minutes suggested for ELA around 120. The most you could see, like, they'll say maybe 90 with some of the different programs. But basically, it's always going to be that shift of ELA before third grade, and then the shift after that to math being the more focused on area for growth.
Thank you for that answer. And I remember when we were going through the books for the different math programs that have been adjusted, that was, I believe, one of the things that was pointed out is that there was more word problems or problems involving words and requiring the students to think. So thank you for that, because that begins to address some of this. I appreciate it. That's it.
Ms. Gary, is there, I believe, isn't there also a mandated number of state hours that grade levels have to have of ELA and math?
It's not specific to content, it's specific to, as you see in the bottom.
The total minutes.
390. So it's more saying at each level, in chapter 4 it'll say, like, high school is, like, you have to have 990 minutes and things like that. So it's not specified through PDE for content. However, the programs being research-based will tell you you should have at least 120 minutes, you should have 60 to 90. And as Bob brought up, number corner is part of how it's put together, so there's different components within the program where they suggest time that should be spent on it.
Thank you. Mr. Hickey?
A question for Mr. Spring first, and then I have one for Ms. Gary. You were talking about the teachers who wanted to teach kindergarten. Did you see any or many teachers that wanted to switch schools so that they could teach kindergarten?
Yes, and that's a great question. That was actually part of our survey. So the steps were initially, first, as any year, as principals tell you, principals have the right of assignment in their building. So that doesn't require a posting or anything of that nature. So we wanted to make sure that they utilize their right of assignments first, as we do in the normal process. And now that all the rights of assignment have been used, there are still a couple of kindergarten positions open, which we are going to be posting for next week. And then at that point, not just, to your point, not just elementary, we actually had a middle school teacher who reached out and said she's interested as well. And so once and she's certified for K-4. So I reached out to her and said, great, definitely, we're gonna be posting it. I'll even let you know once it's up there, please put in. And then that's the process usually for moving from building to building. But yeah, there were some. Most did indicate that they'd like to teach it, but only if they get to stay within their own building. Some did say, though, that they'd be willing to do that.
Yeah, and one of the concerns, is there any school that's taking a particular hit as far as losing personnel so that they can go to another school, like, or?
Not that I've seen.
Okay. Well, thanks, and first of all, I appreciate all the work you did with it. I mean, that's getting, it's probably a fun thing to do to work on scheduling, although it's, no, if you like that kind of stuff, if you like puzzles and stuff like that, I can see, the challenge in it, so it's gotta be rewarding to a great degree, and I appreciate that. Question for Ms. Gary here, as I'm looking at this schedule here, one of the things that have been constantly talked about as it related to full-day kindergarten is this purposeful play. How does that fit into the minutes here and also into the schedule?
That's science and social studies. So they're using the instructional methodology of Play Lab, but they're using the standards and the learning, the content and the skills from science and social studies.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Ms. Oseki?
Yes, well, to echo Mr. Hickey, Mr. Francis, great job with the schedule. That, when you showed that first slide, that was like mostly blank, and you would think I would be able to understand it because it was mostly blank, but kudos to you, because that was obviously a challenge. So I'm glad we have a good team to do things like that, because that's not easy. A couple comments, I guess a question for Mr. Spring. Do we have a need to hire additional staff for specials or other supports, and how is that going? Is that started yet?
Yeah, so that's, as a team, we've started looking at, specials, special education. A lot of that, though, is based on our early intervention numbers that are still coming in. So we've been looking at that as well as support staff. I know, Mr. Francis, we've had conversations and we've started looking at, the need for potentially recess and cafeteria aides. Now we have another lunch period. So all that is currently being looked at. We're currently meeting about that.
Can I jump in there too, Ron?
Yeah, of course.
May I jump in there too?
Of course.
So if you remember when we began the conversation, Ronnie said a little bit earlier that we used a 5-year average of first grade enrollments because that would provide consistency. And when we built the model, this model was built that we saw 202 student increase between kindergarten and first grade, right? And a lot of that may have to do with parents putting their children in a full-day kindergarten somewhere else. But in those projections, when we spoke to you last year about budgeting for the additional staff, we also calculated what we think we're going to need by way of not just regular ed teachers, but specialists, psychologists, special ed teachers, support staff. So those, as Ronnie said, we don't know where we're gonna be in terms of where that is, but we built that into the projections when we first began this journey.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, I would imagine, just based on some conversations I've had, that the numbers are going to continue to grow. So I've talked to a couple families who have like maybe 3 or 4, 2 kids, and one of them went to a private kindergarten. And now they're kind of like, well, I already know the teacher at the private kindergarten, I like the experience. So those families might have to age through, and we might still be seeing increases as new families whose kids haven't gone to a private kindergarten. I also wanted to ask, I thought Mr. Roosevelt's question was really interesting about the minutes. Is it public, I guess, to see what another district's, breakdown looks like? Is that possible? And if it is possible, it might be a really good project for Dr. Barnes to get into, matching with our scores, how many minutes are the districts that are doing great in areas where we're weaker, how many minutes are they given? How do they allocate their minutes? That might be a really fun, interesting project that could benefit the community. So maybe in the future. And then I just wanted to comment also, last thing, 2 last things. One is that, as I say every time, I'm really excited about the purposeful play, and I think Play Lab is a great name for it, but I think these are little kids and they need that break. So I love the way that we have the recesses, the snack, morning meeting, and purposeful play. So it's not just a 5-year-old sitting at a desk all day, because we know that doesn't work. And then the last comment, I am thrilled that we've had so many internal candidates who are interested in teaching kindergarten, because the last thing that we would want is to have 17 brand new, fresh out of college kindergarten teachers. So we know that teachers who have more experience are able to control a room a little bit better, and that's going to really benefit these kids. So I think the way that you're doing it is really wise. And then there'll be a few new teachers in every grade, and that'll be much better. That's it.
Okay. I did have a question regarding the mock schedule. So I guess based upon the mock schedule and how I'm seeing this, this is kind of like the working bones, let's say skeleton, and then each building principal will have their flexibility to then go in like every year and create their schedule based upon their school's needs.
Yes.
You want to talk that through about how the building principals can move that schedule around?
Sure. So basically, if we went back and we started at the beginning when we had the 7 lunch and 7 recess periods, as well as the 7 periods of special that we had planned out during the day, what we would do is sit down with our teams and we would work through, what's going to be the best option for planning together a lunch and a special period, as well as your recess. And then from there, basically what we would do is we work then with the different academic minutes that are needed for each of the areas. And then we'll also work with, when we build those intervention blocks into the end of the day, we try to build them so that when a specialist might need to see students, if it's on alternating days, we can pair a reading and math specialist so that on an opposing day, they would be able to see an opposing grade level so that we can get each of those interventions in each of the areas that's needed. So a lot of the scheduling just goes into, some of it's for preference, but obviously you can see in this schedule up here, if you took first grade for an example, we tried to get as many of those core academic minutes into the morning, and then that's why we also plan specials in the afternoon for those primary grade levels, so they can get the majority of their core subject areas in the morning when we know those kids are going to be most attentive, and then have them do a little less structured, a little bit fun time in that afternoon when they're doing specials. They get that second recess and things like that, so that academically we're providing them with the best opportunity for success.
Great, thank you.
Just to insert one quick detail, can you just speak to the schedule that we have to adhere to regarding recess, and we have to get lunches served beginning at one time and served by another time?
Yeah, so when we did the first slide, those lunches have to be served by 2 p.m. So that's the reason that they're planned in the middle of the day as they are. Left that 15-minute overlap at the end because kids can still eat after that time. They just have to be served lunch by 2 p.m. And then that's really how we got those lunch periods planned in, that they're starting then at 10:45. But again, it allows the flexibility at each building. We do want to, for consistency purposes, because some of our buildings do share specialists and things like that, we do want to try to adhere to having the intermediate grade levels in the morning and the primary grade levels in the afternoon, but also for the same reason we just talked about, because for those younger students and giving them their core subject areas when they're most attentive at that beginning part of the day is going to be most beneficial for them.
Okay. And it doesn't seem like that lunch schedule was modified that much, because it seems like, I know from my son's school, lunch recess for the building starts at 10:30 and they're done by 2. So for anyone that's at home saying, oh my gosh, lunch at 2 o'clock, it's not that much different in terms of they'll get their lunch before 2 and they still have that additional 15 minutes afterwards. So I don't want anyone sitting at home wondering, this completely changed the schedule, which I know personally that it hasn't.
No, I think in most, sorry, I was just going to say, I think in most cases, the biggest change to lunch periods at any of the elementary schools was maybe a 5-minute change.
And what you have to remember, and most people probably don't know this, but because we participate in the school lunch program, we have to have every student in the building served. Their lunch has to be served by 2 p.m. And I think the start time is 10:30.
I think that's the earliest that they can.
10:30 in the morning. So in order to adhere to the guidelines set for us, we have to serve every kid by that time. So even though it's a seemingly wide range of time, there are some parameters put on us. So we don't have really that much wiggle room within that window.
Right. And I remember even when my son was in the younger primary grades, he would get 2 snacks or a snack in the morning and the afternoon, depending whenever their lunch period fell. I do appreciate Mr. Francis and the rest of the committee. I did hear often saying you took a lot of the stakeholder, which I'm sure staff members in the community, teachers, parents, administration, that really seems like you took a lot of thoughtful consideration into those important factors and then building the schedule, the basic schedule off of that, so I appreciate that. Mr. Roosevelt?
Yeah, just a quick final thought. I really appreciate the option to have that decompartmentalization in 6th grade. I believe that might be a conversation for another time, just about decompartmentalization and the benefits, but I appreciate having that planning option, whether it gets used or not. That's interesting. Looking at this mock schedule also, there are, dovetailing back to my earlier question about the amount of time, there was a lot of time in ELA, and that seems to be green in this. And there are a couple of 5 to maybe 15-minute little slivers. Is that extra time being picked up? Or is that just
Well, so
to
some
make
of,
it fit conceptually?
yeah, well, some of it is fit conceptually, but that's realistic to a school day, right? For us to plan a schedule, if we have lunch periods and specials periods that happen at certain times of the day, and we have, academic blocks that are a certain amount of time, there are gonna be smaller periods during the day. So, those blocks that you see, in second grade, if you were to go across and use that as an example, the 10-minute math block that you see in the middle of the day there is what we would have as part of that Bridges program when they do Math Corner. So that's built in. That's a specific math block that is built for that specific area of the program. The other 60 minutes of math is the normal hour instruction that goes along with the lesson that the teacher would be given direct instruction for. But then if you look at any of those ELA blocks that are around there, so around second recess in the afternoon, you'll see a 15 and a 25-minute ELA block that's in second grade, and then all the way at the front end of the day, you'll see a 10-minute ELA block. So, especially at those grade levels where we know that students, like Tammy said, are establishing those basic reading skills, those phonics skills, our teachers are able to use those times for, a small group and meeting and doing something for a 15-minute period of time before they would go out. It also gives them an opportunity to be able to do a read aloud either at the front end or the back end of the day where, that might be a 10-minute period of time where you have students sitting in a group and you can read something aloud to them and then transition to the next thing that you're doing.
What about that one in the afternoon on first grade, between intervention and special?
Yeah, the 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, what you're going to hear, I'm assuming from Tammy, as part of that curriculum discussion is when we have intervention, a lot of times we're gonna wanna pair it up against language arts. So in this particular case, there was a 5-minute increment in first grade that just based on where I chose to have them have lunch and recess and specials, it left the 5-minute block when I put the intervention block in. But what we've been trying to do is in the case when we end up with those smaller periods of time to pair it with the intervention time, so that if the kids are working on something, they can use that additional time to continue to work on finishing whatever it is. It blends itself in nicely as part of that academic time for that subject area.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stone?
Yeah, I just was going to ask about the difference between departmental utilization and self-contained instruction. Is that something that you were going to go over, or I'm trying to see, is that how that 6th grade block, those 4 blocks, is that, how does that work?
They're piloting this year in 6th grade, the different schools to see what it would look like, so I guess.
Yeah, I can,
you speak to it better.
so basically the 4 blocks of time that are built up there that show 60 minutes would allow the kids to get a social studies or science block, a reading block, a math block, and then, it would be a writing block could be what the 4th block is, but it allows them to break it into those 4. If they were in a self-contained classroom, the scheduling of those periods wouldn't make a difference, right? Because one teacher would be instructing each of those areas. In a school that's piloting that departmentalization, a different teacher is teaching every one of those subject areas. So a student in block number 1 would be in one classroom with a teacher teaching math. And when they go to block 2, they would move to a different classroom and that teacher would then be instructing the next subject area that's in their schedule for the day.
So is that being piloted at all the elementary schools?
It's not, no.
Okay. I did actually happen to have a full day slide presentation at some point, and I know Ms. Oseki just asked about some of the additional. So I know this was subject to change, and I know Dr. Sanko talked about the 5-year average of looking at first grade enrollment at 202, and based upon my previous notes, that there was an assumption of an additional 208, so that's about the same, additional kindergarten students based upon that 5-year average of first grade enrollment. So I see it based upon the previous kindergarten presentations, based upon the 17 teachers, it looks like 7 specialist teachers, 5 instructional aides, 3 recess cafeteria office staff, and an additional school psychologist, which makes that annual cost of full-day kindergarten at about $2.6 million. And I know we talked about last year when we approved the budget in 2025, so we had the 0.57% tax increase, which is approximately $1,007,879. That revenue from that 0.57 tax increase spread over 2 years, as I believe Mr. Rapp had explained in the Finance Committee, covers the annual cost of full-day kindergarten. So between last year's 0.57% and then this year 0.57% tax increase, that covers the annual cost of the 2.6 approximate of full-day kindergarten.
And, yeah, so we talked about the one-time expenses we would take out of the
Educational
initiative fund the board had agreed to.
Okay, great, just refreshing everyone's memory. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming, thank you.
Yeah,
I
please do.
will
Tell us that.
tell them. Yeah.
Yep.
So it is kind of a good segue to go from talking about instructional minutes and schedules into talking about curriculum. So somebody had brought up the comment about instructional minutes and the difference between what it looks like. And the simple answer is, from a curriculum standpoint, it's not the time so much that matters as to what takes place during that time. And that's where the curriculum focus is. So in the business of education, curriculum is what we do. This is our work in academics. So curriculum becomes like your standard operating procedure. What you're working with the teachers to create lessons and to create what a course looks like. So when you have, just say with literature, the 120 minutes, what are we doing in that 120 minutes? And what guides us are the state standards. So for each grade level, for the different, there were 9 different areas of standards. Now with financial literacy, it becomes 10, where the state identifies what students should know and be able to do at each grade level. Beyond that, standards are not curriculum. Curriculum is where the teachers are making the choices about what happens during that time. And from there, that's where you're deciding on programs, when you're deciding on assessments to see how things are happening. So curriculum is really our guiding force with teachers of what takes place with students. So being the new person coming in last year, one of the first things you do is look at curriculum is a lot of documentation. So the role with curriculum is really based, and I have talked to you about this before, on a lot of things from Chapter 4 regulations and guidelines of what you have to do. So you have the one side of documentation showing and providing to the school board and to the public to have an approved course. So coming into district is looking at, well, where is all this? Where is it housed? Do people have access to it? What type of components are there? As again, saying those standard operating procedures, one of the things I found being new is some of the things are housed on Google Share Drives, and some of the things are put together in regards to frameworks and priority standards. Some of the things are together in Canvas and put together in different methods. So it's all good and things are there. But again, from a standard operating procedure, if you're audited or you're looked at and a state comes in, you need to have that consistency and equity in what your documentation kind of looks like. In a district of this size, when you have 10 elementary schools, you have 2 different middle schools, you have 2 different high schools, it becomes increasingly important because you have to provide that equity of instruction. So if your student is going to north versus south, you have to have those options available. And you have to make sure if you have Algebra 1 taught in North or South or Newtown or Holland, that all those students are receiving the same Algebra 1 course. So in putting everything together, we started the conversation of how our curriculum is put together and having a curriculum management system. So kind of, I think I put up here, in regards to the goals, when we were looking at everything that came up, is to create a system that has the planning, the development, the approval from the school board, and the review of curriculum for each course that is taught. Because again, it comes to the school board for approval because that's how it operates in the state. The next portion of that is the system. We need a comprehensive housing of it and to the sharing between teachers and also with the public and the students, that there's a transparency that if you request to see something, it's there for you to see. The other part is really to align the writing and the approval process. And what we mean by that is we're talking by full day kindergarten, each of the courses being developed is creating a curriculum, which will then be presented for your approval. And then that would be for the public if there's a question that they could come and see. So it's kind of the three prongs, but what it all comes down to is having the documentation of everything and the approval of the board so that every teacher in the 10 elementary schools, if they're teaching something, is providing that equitable instruction. It's not disparity between different schools based on either resources or that they're teaching things in a different way to kids. So with that, as we started working with the curriculum coordinators, we started having these conversations, we realized the need to have a system to house it. So we did a request for information through the business office. We contacted 3 different vendors, PowerSchool Curriculum Management System, Atlas Curriculum Management System, and Curriculum Works Instructional Management System. We had a group of 10 members, which were technology, administrators, curriculum coordinators, special education, everyone had a seat at the table, and we went through the presentations, went into the systems, had the ability to get into a sandbox to look to see what was there, and also look at other school districts that use them. Because when we say a public-facing part of it is that you could go on a public website, look into the curriculum and see the documentation. So we went through the whole program. At the beginning, Curriculum Works Instructional Management System, we decided from the beginning not to move forward with because they were basically twice the price. So we didn't see the benefit of that. Between PowerSchool and Atlas, the group chose Atlas because it was more focused on curriculum and not so much on just having a system. So the components of it go not just to house something, but to give the professional development of how to put it together on a template. What things are supposed to be there? What type of instruction are you looking at? So it chose Atlas. So with that, there are all different pieces of it. We had put together the budgetary items to look over a 5-year period. Because this isn't something when you buy a system that you'd be changing very frequently because it's housing documents. We put together an action plan in regards to all the steps in regards to professional development, which also is everything that's put together, having the allowance of how it goes through the process to get to you then for approval and looking at. So putting that together, kind of just flipping through, it's a big undertaking with everybody involved. So it impacts every teacher and every student, impacts the parents because it's what our business is the teaching of students. In conjunction with that, as I spoke to you before about changes within the state a few years ago after the pandemic, they added to legislation to say that within every 10 years, every content area standards would be reviewed. So the first one was the STEEL standards, and the STEEL standards go live next year, which means all the courses in science had to be updated to reflect, and there were big changes in science. So that process then is to get to the public, to get to everyone, where approval and public. Well, as I mentioned to you,
The next round happened with after Steele's. So the next areas, and I mentioned this last time I was here, was family consumer sciences, economics, financial literacy is being a required course, and then also the career and work standards. So that means all of those courses with new standards have to be updated to reflect that the instruction taking place is based on those standards. Well, the state school board just updated now that those are going to go live in 26-27. We have to make all those adjustments. The next group has been identified, and those will be art, music, and PE and health. So how the process works with standards is the state school board writes to the Secretary of Education. They say we would like to open these. They form a committee, which they're in the process of now. I think it's March 12th or 13th. That official state school board meeting will be the next step. And we're happy to say we had our art, music, and our PE curriculum coordinators all put in to be on the committee. So hopefully they'll be on there because they're super with the work that they do. From that point, from the committee, they draw national people, colleges, different teachers, and these committees are the ones that look and change the standards. So then from that, they have public hearings, and then from public hearings, the written part goes before the committee again, and then it goes through kind of the legislative part of being looked at. The final approval piece comes in a legislative bulletin. So as soon as those are done, then the next ones will be announced. So this process of having this documentation and having a process becomes really important because there's going to be a lot of change and it's going to be consistent that within the review, some of these standards when you're looking, especially art, music, and PE, they haven't been updated since their original time, which is over 20 years. So these are big changes. So in looking at having this system, there are all these different components put together for transparency, for approvals, and to make sure we're meeting the needs of what children need to know and be able to do according to our state. So with this system, Atlas, what we're kind of proposing with this, because this is the finance side of it as well because of cost, the first year would start with the financial calendar, which would be July 1. But they could start with us with board approval at the next board meeting, would be able to start in April to have all the, it's about 9 to 12 weeks to set up the system with technology and to start the training for everything and to start and to create an implementation plan over this 5-year period. So as we do that, going into it, the cost for everything per year varies by what we have. So the first, from April to June, we would use our current year budget for $2,125. So it's prorated based on students of 10,400. In year one, starting then in July and then going through June, would have the annual subscription rate at a 60%, I believe it is, discount. The reason what they do over the 5 years is start with a very low subscription cost because you're putting your money into professional development. And then as your professional development ends, you get to the full cost of your subscription price. The other part, other fees that are included in, they give you the complimentary support, their Atlas Learning, their online modules for teachers to use. But the other two pieces that would increase costs as you go on are two pieces, a lesson developer and also the part that you could put on the website to make everything public. In putting the pieces together for it, we looked at saying lesson plan piece would come later, that we're going to focus on creating the curriculum. The lesson plan piece is different in that I'm a very old person. I started teaching like way back in the day where you used to have a lesson planner and it was a little black book that had little squares for each day of the week and you had to hand it into your principal. It's not that kind of lesson planning. The lesson planning is now, if you think of, they have like teachers pay teachers, where teachers create content and they sell it to other teachers. That's kind of the more internal piece so that they could create actual plans and then share with each other and work on it. And one of the great benefits, we were just talking, we had sixth grade is getting the new ELA program this year. It's going to be coming before you, but the conversation of having that they could create lessons for modifications for special education. They could create changes in Lexiles for the level of reading. And you could have that and house it, and then it's your own teachers pay teachers. So it's all there for people, and they could pick and use and work with each other to create that. But we thought, let's wait for that, because that has cost to it. It's not something we'd start with at the beginning. It's really getting Council Rock curriculum organized, put together, and before you for approval, and before parents to be able to see. So we have a list. If you want to even go on some of the sites with it, the other districts, and I know there were some local, but again, I don't know local districts with it, but they have, I could give you a list that they provided for us. It's right here. So you can just go on their websites. So, where was David? Penridge. So Penridge is one, if you just Google and go onto the website and you go under curriculum and it'll say, here's Atlas, you click on Atlas and it'll take you, you could click on the course, you go in and you see the course description, you can see the units, you can see the time, everything is there. And we have the ability to choose what we put out there for everyone to see. So I could provide you the list for it within the whole New Jersey, Pennsylvania area. So they're a big vendor and you could just, it's public, so you can see exactly what it is for it. But that's what we're putting forth for approval at the next board meeting. So once that is approved, then we could start the whole plan. And that could be provided as well, because it's a very detailed plan with a focus on professional development. They'll be using Understand by Design 2.0. And next month, I think I'm presenting in regards to curriculum for full day K. And a lot of that is completed already. It's just not in the system. So we could show you kind of what that looks like and what you could expect to see.
Thank you. Questions? I know Ms. Stoner had already a question.
Will we be approving this in theory at the board meeting under education, or are we going to get the detailed numbers and go through finance to approve the financial piece of this? You know, how we're going to...
Right, so I guess, are you going to be looking for the 5-year approval in the next board meeting, or?
I put together the 5-year plan for it, so you could break down to see where the dollars would go and how it transitioned from paying for one thing to the other thing. Then with the contract for approval, I think I submitted all that for you to see. So I have to defer because I'm a new person and I don't know kind of how you do it.
It kind of crosses both worlds, obviously. This is an educational initiative to house our curriculum, which is essential. I mean, you know, curriculum instruction assessment, that's kind of where the rubber hits the road. And in terms of uniformity and consistency, I think we do lack that. You know, as Mrs. Gary said, we have components everywhere, but they're just in different forms. And that's not really a great thing, especially when it comes to compliance. And even if you think about it, even for a more practical matter, like hiring new teachers, hiring potentially 17 new teachers. Well, where's the curriculum? How do I teach this? And as much as even that, I saw everybody admire, you know, the elementary schedule and Mr. Francis, and that was I mean, it's a secondary, and I don't say this to, it's just a point of comparison, like, that's you have third grade math. Well, at the secondary level, you're going to have algebra, geometry, trigonometry, calculus, pre-calculus, statistics. So, like, it's a lot. It's a lot. So I do think that this is an important tool that could help us, but it costs money. So that's the finance. So in terms of, you know, the contract, if the board is comfortable with us doing it through Tony at a finance before we go, we can do that as well. That comes before the next meeting anyway, so we can do that.
Well,
Also, we have the one, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask, but can we get a short description in, you know, like in a slide format where we see exactly what the expense is in each year? what's being purchased in each year. And then also describing what we were looking for. You said steel, what the first part of that is the science. Then you had a couple of other initiatives for the following year that needed to be dealt with.
Your list right now that you'd have to look at as a board coming through, because that's kind of a discussion with Al, Nicole, and Andy, how you break it apart for the board to see and the time to have to do approval over your board meetings for it. Because typically in an audit, every curriculum should have the date of approval for everything on it. So the first ones that you would be looking at would be all the changes to the science to STEEL standards.
Right.
The second one would be full-day kindergarten because it's a change in programming. And leading into it, it would be elementary ELA. So you have the change that you had with Reading Horizons and Structured Literacy. So that would be K to 5. Then you're looking in with the purchasing of 6, 7, and 8 is taking place. So we're trying to put together kind of that big chart to say when and how things are happening. There's some things that were in process, like even before I got here, to say these all have to be put together so they're reflective of the standards and what's taking place in the classroom. Because you have your written curriculum, you have your taught curriculum, and you have your assessed curriculum. So in meeting with Tom, as he's doing the data, that assessment piece is really going to say, is our curriculum working? But it has to be put together in the way so that like within this system, the assessments will be identified. They'll be linked to the standards so that we can see if the standards are being met or not from like your PSSA scores to say, how do we improve the curriculum? So it's creating a systemic approach to the learning and how we look.
In a chart form,
Yeah,
those
Yeah,
itemized.
perhaps, I guess maybe the best format I'm thinking, I'm just thinking out loud here, would be we could memo the board with all that information prior to the finance meeting.
Yeah, great.
Does that work?
Yep, wait, do we have the other year, I know, okay, so then it is, just finishing Ms. Stone's question, do we have the other year, so we get the April to June if approved for this year for $125? Or 101? Wait, what?
2,500.
2,500?
I have to, it would be easier, so I have copies of it made.
Okay, so $2,500.
Just to discuss.
Either, I mean, that's.
So what it's based on then is a set fee per student. So for this year prorated, it would be from April to June is $2,125.
Oh, 2,120.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I could just wait for everyone to get this. So I broke it down by year 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to see what the different services are. So every year, the basis of how the cost is put together is on the number of students. So that's why you always see 10,400 is the round kind of number for it. Again, could going up or down, adding kindergarten or anything like that. So in year 1, which is start your fiscal year for recurring services, your subscription is minimal, so it's only $8,500. Year 2, it would go up with a 60% discount on it, then to $15,184. Then it moves up to year 3, 4, and 5, and so you're paying the full price for the service. The premium support and the Atlas Learn, pretty much they're, the complimentary at the beginning. The big cost at the beginning is the PD, the recurring, so them coming in, them providing the services and working with the teachers and the training. So the first 2 years, it's $30,000, but that goes away because everybody's trained. So that kind of balances the cost between the subscription service, giving them the discount at the beginning, but then at the end, you're not paying for PD anymore. The added on cost then really starts with year 2. I put a little asterisk, the Atlas public site is $550, and that's so we can put on the website and any parent can access to see that. And that's an important part. And people will always question what's there, so the more transparent to say, you want to see what's being taught in third grade math? Yeah, click on it, and there it is. There are the units. It won't have specific instructional things that are taking place because that's at teacher discretion depending on the kids. But you'll have the units, you'll have the content, so it's public. Moving into year 3, as it begins to do the shift, we just have included the public site. Year 4, again, it's the public site being there, and then year 5, that's at the very bottom at it, Atlas lesson. That's about 10,400, and that's something, say, wait to see, and when we're ready for it, to look at it to review. So with this, the contract is looking at over a span of 5 years, but there's room to shift and change things that you want to have or not in it.
So when you say total annual recurring fee, that doesn't mean,
it shifts every year.
Right, so it's not year 4 is 39,000 plus the 49,000 from year 5.
No.
So it's not really a recurring
Yeah.
fee, you just said that's the annual.
That's their
fee.
language, yeah.
Okay.
So when you see in the contract, that's what they have. But yeah, it switches and changes.
Okay.
Okay, so, so it was Ms. Oseki, Mr. Hidalgo, then Ms. Warner.
And this get forwarded to Mr. Rapp?
Yeah, he has it.
Okay.
So, obviously, I think something like this is important, and I think we all know that, and consistency among our schools and our teachers is important, and anything that saves our teachers time is important. So I don't, it's a lot of money, but I don't necessarily balk at it. My questions are, and I know Mr. Rapp is excellent at contract negotiation, so I'm sure he's thought about all this, but you mentioned how difficult it is to switch from this service to another. Like, if we don't like it, can we get out of it? What if we're in it and, they double their prices and we need to move? Can we have a longer contract if we want it? All those things are things that cross my mind.
On the table, you guys discuss with it. The thing with curriculum is you had as a district, and I want to think it's called Curriculum Matters. It was part of the, things are really weird with education because all these different systems they're equity kind of things. So they buy different companies and then they'll get rid of different companies. So it was eSchool, used to be SunGard Penimation. They were bought out. So now you have Power School,
Right.
But they own eSchool. So they used to have their curriculum piece, and that's what Council Rock had. And then they got rid of it as their equity thing. So that's why there's this deficit, because you had something, then there wasn't. And it ties into their other programming that they do as well. So you always have to be kind of nimble to keep up with the different systems because it's not based on what's great for education. They're owned by equity companies. So even if you want to say this will be really great and we could keep it for however, if those companies change, it could be a switch. But with the negotiating of this is different because that's one of the things with Power School that they looked at and considered. Power School is the equity-based company, whereas this company has been along a long time and it's curriculum-based. So my personal thought is this is going to be around a very long time, and the decision of if you like it, I always come back that you should always do program evaluation for anything you have. So after the certain time, we really reevaluate to see, because are they keeping up with market? Are they keeping up with changes to things? So that's not my expertise with business. So however that would like to be handled.
The only thing I would add to that is before we engage in any contract and ask the board to engage it, our solicitor reviews it, and all of our agreements, we look to have some kind of out clause, whether it's a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day out clause. And Tammy's absolutely right. These companies just merge and somebody buys somebody out. We just recently went through it with our website provider, and now we're at Final Site. And one of the things that I know we've learned going through the process that Tammy's talking about when you talk about companies like Tammy's talking about or Power School. A couple things that we have to pay close attention to. One are the add-ons, what comes in with the base price. And then the second, if we did decide to move from product A to product B, how much data are they going to pull from one system, put into another system as part of the agreement, and how much is it going to cost us? And oftentimes they'll say we'll do 3 years or 4 years or 5 years of a data pool and give you and put it in the new system that you're purchasing. So there's a lot of work on behind the door on work that goes on in the back of the house with any kind of contract before we put it in front of you.
Mr. Hidalgo?
Thank you. This is good stuff. I was wondering as far as, so I'm looking at Penridge, right? And I'm understanding it pretty quickly. So they have a schedule. They schedule out by weeks. Can me as a parent, be assured that the teacher doesn't split things? So sometimes, we're going to do unit 4 first. And so I'd like to know if we're going to have more problems with, parents looking saying, you're not doing what I'm expecting you're supposed to be doing.
That's an excellent question, because coming in, that's where a lot of conversation has been, and the biggest one was between science and social studies in elementary school and how they flip. So we had a lot of conversation with that in regards to, say you walk the balance to saying teachers have the knowledge and they understand what they're doing. So you want to have flexibility built into curriculum, but you also need to have the consistency to say that every student is receiving the same thing. So if you're flip-flopping things around, it's not happening that way. So we had those conversations to say, as we progress and move forward through everything, it's called kind of the scope and sequence, would say, this is what's taking place in September. This is what's taking place by the end of the marking period. So there's the flexibility if you have to stop and you have to reteach, but there's still kind of the boundary saying, this is the understanding by this time, this is what has to be done. So that's kind of having those conversations with the teachers, and I going through the process with kindergarten and them having the discussions and look at it, you're going to be so pleased when you see these documents that they're working on, because they're having the conversations to say, this is important, we have to focus our time on this. And you know what, this might be really nice, but it's not meeting our focus of what the kids have to do, so this has to go. So whenever you're working with curriculum, and the teachers will tell you this, if you're going to put something in, something has to come out. And that's where you're looking at the impact with school improvement to say, okay, like we got our scores and we see that text analysis, we need more for our students to be able to pull out evidence. Well, then that's what we have to focus on with it. And what's the best way to do it? So kind of, I don't want to seem like a wish-washy answer. So you have the two. You have these are the bumper guards to say this is when it has to be done, but we know you need flexibility in case you need to be a couple days off with this or that.
Oh, okay, so that is kind of like I'm trying to get the answer.
Yeah.
So what I don't want to see is for me to, because I like this kind of stuff. I want a syllabus. I want to help a kid when I can help them and follow what's going on. And this is very detailed.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mind if they stray.
Mm-hmm.
But if they go off the bumpers and then now all of a sudden this thing is useless and we're paying for it, then I understand there's some discretion. I like teachers having discretion. But if this is going to help us follow the curriculum, like almost mandated to be that way, then I think that's a good thing. And then also I see like only in first grade, second grade, we're only really, they're only tracking one subject, I guess. So as you get higher up in grades, you put more into it, and it's up to you guys, right? They could put more in if they wanted to.
Yeah, it really, yeah.
Are we going to do the same thing in roll it out slowly?
Well, that's the part of it, is that it's not a good idea to put everything at once. However, I can say, there are a lot of teachers chomping at the bit to say, this is it, this is going to be great for it. It looks at different aspects of curriculum as well. So the standards are written K to 12, but there's grade level bands for it. So when a program like this, the teachers are attaching standards to different things that they're teaching and then how they're assessing it. So we can do, it's called vertical articulation K to 12, to say, how are our standards and how are our kids progressing and where are their gaps? So that piece of looking at the data and knowing how to target the learning becomes very important. And then the other side of it, as Al was like saying, the different levels of courses. So you can have an academic level, you have the honors level, you have AP. What is the specific difference in taking the courses? Like, how is it the skills are different? How is it the instructional things that teachers are doing? And that's where this becomes very specific. So it's all different levels.
Ms. Horner, Mr. Tate, Ms. Stone, Mr. Hickey, okay.
I'm glad you said about the teachers, because my question is, has the teachers been presented with this, or a group of teachers to say, hey, this is what we're looking at? And I'm glad to hear that you have done that.
They have, one of the things with it is, teachers are organized day to day. This is what we're doing. So last year when I came, we were working on the report card with assessments, and we were looking at changes in programming for structured literacy. So what we did over the summer, because I'm a very kind of black and white person, everything has to be a very kind of, it all has to be put together. When we were rolling out the things, I was like, there has to be guidelines to say what lessons you're supposed to do. So we created an elementary, we call them the 4 core, a scope and sequence to say, this is what you should be teaching, these are lessons you should be on, and then these are the assessments that you are using to make sure that the kids understand, and then reporting out on the report card. So the work with the teachers at first, I think it was kind of, I'm gonna say recalibrating your brain of how you put things together and organize, but that's what they're looking for. The teachers are so on board with everything, and when we share with you the kindergarten things, they love it, they have it organized, put together, and you show it to a parent, they're like, this is exactly what I need to see to what's going on. So they've been very involved and very enthusiastic about the process. They're looking forward to it.
Okay, so they know about the program and how it works and involved with it.
Yeah.
And then, you might have said this already, but on Penridge and all this information's public. But has anybody gone to these other schools that have Atlas and said, how do you like it? And gotten feedback on actually because it's Atlas, as you said, 2 other programs you also looked at, but Atlas is what you're presenting to us.
Yeah.
So have we gotten feedback from?
We haven't reached out to teachers at the different levels, but it was interesting because as we were presenting to cabinet, David Bolton, who used to be at the thing, he was like, oh yeah, that's what we use. And he started telling his story. And then Ronnie Spring used to be a principal in New Jersey. He was like, oh, that's what we use. And he started giving his feedback for it. So the different level of feedback with it, because I worked at districts that had things public facing and districts that didn't have. I think something that's very impactful for it is the public's ability to see it. So we would like to share that with parents, but I found a list of the different school districts here that I could provide. Garnet Valley School District, South Brunswick in New Jersey, South Orange Maplewood. You just go on the website to see. So when we had the group of 10 fill this table here, and they started to go on to see, and we had all the different stakeholders from technology, special education. When they all went on it, they're like, oh, well, wow, this is powerful. So we could do something more with that if you'd like us to share it with like public to get their feedback with it, anything like that. Willing to do whatever you'd like.
Mr. Tate?
Quick question, please, Ms. Gary. I think this sounds marvelous. It's a very modest expense for what sounds like a very valuable tool. And the transparency thing, I think, is marvelous. That's sort of a side benefit from my point of view, the primary tool is for you and the teachers and the administrators and so forth. But the public transparency, I think, is a wonderful benefit. It will look different school district by school district, right? Because I heard you say that we get to choose what we, great.
So customizable.
Great. Well, I just think it's marvelous, and I believe in uniformity and consistency and flexibility, and that's a difficult balance, but it sounds very valuable. So thank you.
Stone and then Mr. Hickey.
Yes, some of it has been answered with all these questions, but has this program been updated? You're saying now it's been around a long time. So do they work with the districts to get feedback to how they need to change it? And this all part of the program that when they do upgrades, they let us know and we don't pay extra for their changes.
Yeah. One of the biggest pieces in the group, the difference between Power School and Atlas was they really appreciated the way that the sales reps worked with them and discussed. It wasn't just like we're selling it as Dr. Sanko said about an add-on to something. It was the customer service involved with everything and their ability to say, we're going to sit down with you, we're going to train you, this is what it looks like. But putting everything out there because the success is more about curriculum than it is purchasing an add-on to a system.
So this is a national organization?
Yes. I believe they used to be called Rubicon and now it became Atlas. So they've been around a long time.
Mr. Hickey.
Thanks for the presentation. Couple questions. I was glad to hear the legalese part of it. As far as what happens after a couple years if we don't like it or whatever. So if we purchase this, are we purchasing all 5 years worth?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. Another question is, what are you going to do if we say no?
Well, there's the different ways. So I had this conversation last year when I came in to say, if you're ever audited with curriculum, it's just like your audit that you'd go through financially with it. And they come in, they look at everything. No matter what, you have to do it. So why the technology makes it easier is because it's technology. You're able to have drop-down menus to do things, you're able to put it together. If you don't have that, then it's the old-fashioned way of you're creating it on a template and they're hard copies and you keep the hard copies there. I talked to Dr. Sanko last year, we made the planned course documents, so they're all PDFs. So I said what I could do is add those to the site and you just create a website that's gonna hold the document and won't have the teacher use it.
Which costs money. Your time is valuable.
Right.
And other administrators who are doing this. My other question, you probably don't have the answer, and maybe it's a question that Mr. Rapp can answer, but I'm going to ask it now anyway. You say we used to use PowerSource, we currently...
I think it was called Curriculum Matters, and it was in the suite of add-ons with eSchool.
The question that I have is, what did we pay for that? No, that's the question. I'm just saying that I want to ask the question now, so when we get that answer, we know how much more it's going to cost us or not.
We can get you that answer. Going off of memory, I think it was around $30,000 a year, but I'll get the number from Tony. However, when I said earlier about paying for the add-ons, I don't know what the add-ons were going to cost that Tammy and company need that comes with Atlas. But I'll talk to Tony and get the exact prices on it. We used, I believe it was called Curriculum Connector. Curriculum Connector at the time. And that's where I learned personally. I learned about the ripping of the data and transferring it. And that became cost prohibitive once we got to the 3, 4, 5 year mark.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't want to say we're budgeted for it already, but I mean, maybe this is something that we're already paying for and this is just a better system, so it would make that decision easier.
I believe that with Curriculum Matters, that was sunsetted by the company.
Correct.
That's why I did it.
Right. Okay. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Mr. Roosevelt?
Thank you. So adding up all of these blue numbers for all of the 5 years, it's roughly 200K. Divided by the 5 years is roughly 40K. So thinking the previous one was 30, maybe plus add-ons, it might be comparable. But we'll wait for the final numbers. That being said, you did mention, I was also interested with what Mr. Hickey said. What are we paying now? What system are we using now? But it sounded like, and I don't know if I'm wrong here, but we were using something and then we stopped. So would it be accurate to say we've gone a year or a couple of years without doing anything? Or
I think in the absence of that, it's using Google Shared Drives and Canvas.
Okay.
So, which is like, it is what it is,
Yeah.
but saying that you don't have a consistent template, you don't have a lot of the things that, like, what you're supposed to have according to the state. So the things are there, the people do work on them. It's just not in the format, like if you call to say like, oh, I'd like to see this.
Right.
Have to search for where to find it, have to see, and it might not look the same, just say like an elementary curriculum document doesn't look the same as a high school curriculum.
So this would be an upgrade to that,
Yes.
negating the need for those two programs.
I don't know if you negate them because you use them for many other things, because Canvas is a learning management system.
Okay.
So with that, it's on a daily use of them inputting information and communicating with students. It's more a particular day-to-day, it's an LMS. Google is more of, you could use it as a browser, you could use it with documents, you could use it for sharing, so it has a lot of different uses. It's just not really great practice to use the shared drive to hold your important documents for a district.
Right, so we'd still have to use the Google and the Canvas. So this isn't really a replacement, it's kind of in addition to.
It was, I think, a workaround to do it.
So historically, we had Curriculum Connector as a district, predating Tammy, predating any of us at this table. The district looked at replacing Curriculum Connector. And there were 3 vendors, and I'm going off of memory here, I believe there were 3 vendors that came into the district, and the district narrowed it to 1, and I recall that the Curriculum Connector was about $30,000 a year. And at some point, that initiative just kind of dropped off, and our teachers, we didn't have a Tammy or that role at that time, and our teachers, and I know Matt was involved in some of this. Our teachers were looking for a place to house this information, to be able to share, and folks like Matt McCarthy and many of our teachers reverted to how do we work around, because we don't have that net to catch everything. And since Tammy has been in this role, that's one of the things we're working on. I'm not going to repeat everything she just said because she did it so eloquently, but that's where we were, and that's how I recall the approximate dollar amount. Again, I'll get you that. But so we went from having a tool to a workaround, and now we're asking to replace that tool.
Ms. Polly, and then Ms. Osecki.
So I think this has been a very good discussion, and a lot of the things that you answered made me feel that this is something that you need, because the alternative is very inefficient, and it does not use technology. I mean, we are like going backwards instead of going forwards. And I agree with Mr. Tate, it's a modest expense for what you get, and having the transparency and having the public able to participate, this is very important too, that we never had before, right? Yeah, so I don't know if you're gazing for like support on this table, but you have mine.
Ms. Osecki?
Just, my question, I think, is for Dr. Sanko. Just, when was the Curriculum Connector sunsetted? Like, how long are we talking?
maybe 4 years ago, 5?
We haven't been paying for it.
No. I can get that answer too, I just don't know.
Yeah, I'd like to know for sure.
Okay, that was a great discussion around the ALICE program. I guess I will just kind of close out before we move on to the next. I'm going to kind of echo what Mr. Tate said, and also I know, Ms. Gary, you've been here multiple times and presented curriculum, the course guide, your course work planning, the scope and sequence, talking about assessments and data. So along with the standards that, this from the state. So this kind of brings everything to one place. We currently don't have anything. It seems like it's much needed. I'm hearing kind of the same language of consistency, common language, transparency, flexibility that we've all at this table spoken about, and Ms. Gary, you've spoken about as well. And I also just want to mention that, I know there's board members here in the past, and even talking about the kindergarten teachers, we're talking about equity and talking about the balance between north and south and flipping and making sure that there's a balance between the two. So this program or this system would allow for that and the ease of use, so we're not having this workaround using Google or Canvas. So this is a much easier system. Yes? And then, so this will be on the next board meeting for looking for approval, and based upon the fact that we'll maybe get something, the board members,
Okay, so I think
the
the only thing
actual.
I'm unsure of, we had spoken earlier in the conversation about potentially bringing this before the finance committee first. or
Okay.
If you,
I think it should come to the finance committee.
okay, we'll do that, and then we'll go, after the finance committee, to the full board.
Okay. Thank you so much. Mr.
Thanks,
Manning.
Tammy.
Thank you.
Drive carefully, would you?
Thanks, Tammy.
Dr. Sanka, did you give this out to the board, like all the things?
I did not.
Can I use my colleague, Ms. Carlisle? When you come here? Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, right.
Thank you.
Let's get some air from. It's hot. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So first of all, thank you for having me tonight. I might read from my notes and I want to share why, because the hard work that's done and compiled in that document is not my work alone. I work with wonderful supervisors of special ed, a supervisor of student services, and a newly hired supervisor of curriculum instruction. So I work with an exemplar team. And so I might read from my notes because the work I'm going to share with you is not reflective of just what I do, but what they do as well. And I like the old quote from Helen Keller, alone we could do so little, but together we could accomplish so much. So when we all work together, it really does help accomplish things. And thanks to the board and thanks to Dr. Sanko, we did hire a supervisor of curriculum and instruction, and that's Miss Amanda Serene. And I'm going to tell you why it's important. I listened to Tammy speak and about the unification. Now, the one thing about special ed is not one size does not fit all. So for us, you got to keep in mind under IDEA, there's 13 disability categories. And within those disability categories, there's going to be different interventions, different programs, and different levels of support that's going to work for them. So we have itinerant students who are included for 80% or more of the day, supplemental 40% to 79%, and full-time, which is less than 20%. So we really do have to work with Ms. Serene and her supervisors together to ensure that we put the most effective program into place to meet the needs of our students. And that's what special education is about. We're a needs-based program, right? So we take this medical analogy, we take a student comes in and we realize they're not learning, something's going on, we're not meeting their needs in a general, so we do an assessment. From that assessment, we list an area of needs. And it's our job as supervisors, in collaboration with the teachers, to make sure we meet the needs of those students. So it's a little different than general education. I just wanted to share that. That's why I say we work really hard to find those individual strategies at work or instructional strategies. And the key part of special education is not really the where it occurs, but what occurs. We call that specially designed instruction. So our SDIs and our IEP are the most important things because that's going to tell our parents and that's going to tell everyone how we're modifying our curriculum, how we're modifying our instruction strategies in order to meet the needs of those students. So I know it's kind of like off task, but I think it's important because Ms. Khan was at our meeting the other day, our steering committee, and we were sharing things that we put into place and she was not aware of that. So I'm going to read a list, I hope you don't mind, of some of the programming that my colleagues and I have put in place. So for example, I just want to share that letters training, which is a Orton Gilliam model that works on the basic core foundations of reading, which is like phonemic awareness, phonemes, decoding, encoding, comprehension. All of our elementary school teachers are either in year 1 or 2 of their training, and that's really thanks to Ms. Carl and Mr. Marcinkowski who put that together. And we also have Read 180. And Read 180, the basics of that, which they brought down to the elementary school, is called coding. And coding does the same thing. It hits those basic core foundations because if you can't decode and encode and sound out words through phonemes, how are you going to learn how to read, right? And as Tammy shared, K through 3, we learn to read, and 4 and above, we read to learn. So if our students are missing those core foundations, then it's really going to be hard for them to be included to a greater extent. And that's what we want to do. We want to put the interventions in place, and based on those interventions, we include our kids to a greater extent. We also followed that up, and with Ms. Vordiotis at the middle school does the Aspire program. The Aspire program is the middle level programming for letters. The one thing too, we look at each individual program differently. So even in autism, I always share this, it really is a spectrum, right? So our teachers at Goodnow, because they're level 1 and level 2 students, all of our teachers at Goodnow, special ed teachers, have been trained in the general education curriculum. So they do Reading Horizons, they do Wonder, they do Wonder Works. And they either pre-teach or reteach or push into those classrooms to support their students. Let's see what else. In our programs at Holland, which are our level 4 students, so we use what we call Edmark. Edmark is a research-based program, and Edmark is our alternative to phonemic awareness. It's building those sight words and those vocabulary words for our students so they can recognize words. And sometimes our students, based on their needs, they can't encode and decode, so sight words work better for them, so we want to teach them those core words to make them productive. We also, thanks to Ms. Carl, we started looking at, it's called a UFly program. It's University of Florida Literacy Institute Foundation, which is another systematic, explicit, phonemic-based program. So that's one of the things we're exploring now. In all of our classrooms, we have Unique Learning System. Unique Learning System is a program that is standards-based, and it's designed specifically for students with special needs. We additionally this year piloted, it's called Everyday Speech, between our speech pathologists and special ed teachers at Goodnow. It's a way for us to address the emotionality and the social emotional regulation of our students. So that, we got a free trial, so they're piloting that. We're gonna look and see what the data says before we go on any further. So kind of a long-winded way of talking about our new supervisor of curriculum instruction, but I think it's important for this committee to understand all that goes into what we do every day and how, whether it's in Ms. Carl's program learning support, those students' needs might be different than the children I work with in autistic support. And even in autistic support, my children who have level 1 and level 2, their needs different than students with level 3 and level 4. And then when you get with children with multiple disabilities, that's a different category as well too. So I just wanted to share breaks. I could talk special ed all day, so I promised Nicole she wouldn't have to get the hook out. But if I go on too long, please let me know. But I love what I do, and I enjoy sharing that with this team. So the next thing we started talking about is the formation of CPAC. Now, CPAC is our Special Education Parents Advisory Council. So we started that this year. Some meetings were really effective, some maybe not as much. But that's our opportunity to work together as a team for the parents to share their voices, to share their expressions, to talk about what we're going to do. And it really should be a collaboration. Our goal is to work together in a collaborative manner for you to understand what we're doing and for us as a district to hear your voices and let you know your voices matter. So the difference, some people were confused, like CPAC is our Parent Advisory Council, where we're also at the same time, we're doing our special education plan. Now, the special education plan is more about compliance. And I know Dr. Sanko has shared this numerous times. There's 180 pages in that plan. The input that we get from parents, and it's not that we don't want to, it's what's limited to us by the state, is really like 7 different categories. It asks you about positive behavioral support, it asks you about least restrictive environment, it asks you about professional development, it asks you about autism, but everything else is really procedural. Because years ago, I'm older, special ed was in the basement, right? So part of our special ed plan is saying, where are your classrooms? They want to make sure our classrooms are in the ebb and flow of our buildings. Like, they want to make sure we're not all the way in the back of the building, or we're not always allocated, or on lower level. They want to make sure that our students are in the ebb and flow of the classroom. So that's one area. Then they look at our teachers' caseloads. So all of our teachers, based on the identified disability that the children work with, have a caseload limit. So for example, in autism, if you're a full-time supplemental teacher with autism, working with children with autism, you only get 8 students on your caseload. If you work with students at the itinerant level, it's 12. Multiple disabilities is similar. The only place it really changes is learning support. Then, believe it or not, itinerant learning support, they can have 50 on their caseload, but we know that's not really effective. So the real difference, if you're looking at to differentiate between our CPAC and our special ed plan, is one about collaboration, which is our CPAC, and one is about compliance, which is our special ed plan. And our special ed plan we do every 3 years, and we took input from everyone, and then now we have the steering committee who will guide the process. But everyone will have input. I believe the date is March 25th that we have to have it up on the web. We do have one more meeting scheduled with the steering committee. That's on March 19th. And then the next step would be, it'd be open for everyone to give input on March 25th. The next thing we were legally complying to do was our Indicator 13 training. So one of the things I look at in special education, our Indicator 13 is how are we preparing our students for the post-secondary world, right? So they have all these protections under IEP, they get all these supports and services, but when they graduate and they go on, a lot of those protections are no longer in place. So when you get to Indicator 13, it's looking to see if we as a district, 1, have viable goals for our students, 2 is, are they measurable? And 3 is, are they preparing our children for the post-secondary world? So we look at post-secondary education, we look at employment, we look at independent living skills. Most people under the misillusion, independent means whether I'm gonna live at home with my parents or not. That's not it. It means, are you developing money skills? Are you developing time management? What other skills are you developing to be independent? I kind of look at it this way. I look at, like, when you're doing IEPs like K through 8, it's how do we move our kids forward? But when we get to the transition section, we got a backward design, right? We have to say, where do we see our students in the post-secondary world? And how do we get them there? So if our students' goal is to go to college or go to technical school, their program's going to differ, right? Because we want to make sure when they reach that age that they're ready for that. And some of our kids graduate at 18 with a diploma based on credits. Some of our kids graduate based on goals. And thanks to the board, we are supporting our kids till 22 minus a day, right? It's because the law says that our students are entitled to participate in schooling through the 21st year. So that's why it seems strange to us, right? On the day they turn 22nd, we have to say goodbye. That's because the letter of the law says they're entitled to education until their 21st year. So, not that I don't think it's right, because it could be, they could come to school in September and October 19th could be their birthday and we might have to say goodbye. Now, I'm sorry. So this was compiled, like our professional development was compiled by all of our staff members. And so when our staff members first start, we do a new hire workshop on IEP writing. Throughout the year, we do an IEP refresher shop, and Ms. Carl runs them. And we're focusing on students. I know least restricted environment is important. So we have our teachers, they have bring in IEPs, we review them to make sure we are educating students in our least restricted environment. And then we also look at functional behavioral assessments and positive behavioral support, because that impacts our students' ability to learn, right? And what I always say, in working with the BCBA's, behavior is always an antecedent to the behavior, right? But sometimes we have to determine how we're gonna find out what that antecedent is, and that's where a functional behavioral assessment is. In the autistic support program, it's not, some people say it was Autism 101, it's not really. It's understanding that within autism, there's differentiation of the needs of our students. So when you're talking about autism awareness, it's understanding that not every child is the same, and it really is a spectrum disorder. We also support the IU and because parents will say, like, why is my student in this class and we need data to support that. So the IU came in and it's called Verbal Behavioral Milestones, so VB mapping. It gives you indicators on 3 different levels of what's missing in those students' programming. And if we can fill those boxes where they're missing those core, hopefully we can move them forward. And we did use the IU to come in and provide that training for all of our teachers at Holland, as well as our speech pathologists. In addition to that, we did bring the IU in, and we did a training with all of our speech pathologists, all 17 of them, and our special ed teachers, and any paraprofessional that wanted to come in. We did a training on augmentative and alternative communication. So it called AAC devices in short, but we use too many acronyms, so I'll try and spell everything out. So, because in our world, we're so used to them, but I know if you're not in our world, it's hard. So we have really wonderful board certified behavior analysts. They're wonderful, and we kind of changed the model a little bit. Like when I first came here, they were more reactive, meaning like if a kid was having behaviors, we called the behavior analyst. The behavior analyst came, did an assessment, and told the teacher strategies. Now we have our behavior analysts as being inclusion facilitators. So they're going into the classrooms almost like a behavior MTS model. Like they're going in classrooms and they're providing strategies, they're providing trainings. I mean, they've done, I'll give them credit where credit is due. So far this year, they've done Introduction to Autism and Applied Behavioral Analysis, Pairing Strong Relationships, Principles for Learning, Motivation and Reinforcing, Shaping Skills for All Learners, Teaching Techniques, Behavioral Treatment in School Settings. They also help run school-based team meetings. Like we now have live logs. Like if you go into a classroom that has students with behaviors, our BCBAs can go into the live log and check on the behaviors so they know if the interventions are working. And then our support staff are invaluable. I mean, I can't emphasize enough how important they are to our programs. So we are trying to do more trainings for them. So we're trying to do, in secondary low incidence, they did one approach to universal design for learning, how we could support those kids in the general ed classroom. In our Achieve program, they did building relationships in the transition years. We understanding specially designed instruction, foundations of emotional support, and all our low incidence disability classrooms, we do CPR and first aid. Now, in addition to that, there's crisis prevention intervention. That's our de-escalation techniques for our students. And Dr. Sanko has asked us, and we've working with all staff members, all support staff are getting what we call CPI training. And so far, our BCBAs have provided 7 trainings to all the support staff. And additionally to that, they also provide recently a training for our security people in the buildings. We also work with our transportation department, right? Because they start with them and they end with them. So we have done, Mr. Helsinger and I have done 4 bus monitor and driver trainings for them on techniques of how to work our kids with special needs. Then the last thing we did is we actually brought the Bucks County Intermediate Unit in to do a total program evaluation of our speech pathologists, right? To make sure, one, is the students are getting the services. They've been in the same routine for a long time. So we thought, I also supervised with Ms. Carl, that there are things that we can improve. And sometimes it needs that outside evaluation for people to recognize that. So they came in and they met with our team, they observed our team, met individually with our teams. From that, we came up with common schedules, we come up with live logs, and the district, hats off to everyone in here who supported that, we now have an up-to-date library of all testing materials for our speech pathologists. Because at one time, they were using testing materials that were old and out of date, which wouldn't have been legally defensible. So now, due to the program evaluation, due to working with, the team, they now have a whole library of all up to date. So hopefully that helps them. That's pretty much it.
Thank you, Dr. Cantor. I think it's important just to reinforce before we open it up for to questions that this is just highlights. There's, as you already referenced, so much more happening with the special education department and the team. And so thank you for summarizing that. And again, there's a lot more beyond what was even mentioned tonight. So we'll open it up for questions.
Mr. Hidalgo?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Cantor.
Quite well.
This is pretty impressive. As I said, if I go back and listen to anything tonight, it's going to be when you were speaking about this. You threw a lot of information out there to get us a good look under the hood of what we're doing, and I'm really proud of the work that we're doing. I know that there's always things we can do to improve in the individual situations that we're attacking, and helping. We're not attacking, we're helping. So I'm hoping that that this disclosure and transparency, helps people see and give them some peace of mind that we are working hard. There's a lot of people here. There's a lot of things I heard tonight that I'm like, wow, okay. It's more than just my student or the situation that I'm in, and it's very broad spectrum, and there's a lot of people involved. And any support you need from us, we're going to give it to you.
Thank you very much. And I think you hit a key point, is like, we have to be continuous improvement in our process, right? Because the needs of our kids change. And honestly, we're talking about the growth of our program continues to change as well, too. Like, and hats off to the district, because I can't tell you how many calls I get from people from other states that say, I heard about your program, can you tell me something about it? I'm living in New Jersey, and I'm thinking of moving into the Council Rock area. What can you tell me about your program, or can we come for a tour of your program? And I'm telling you with all sincerity, it has to be, over the last couple of weeks, it's been 5 phone calls, right? Yeah.
Other questions? Ms. Warner?
Thank you. I think this was a great thing to have for us to be transparent and to say, this is what we worked on, this is where we're going, this is what is happening. It is growing. It is unbelievable. There are so many facets, and it's so different for every single student. Individuals, so there's always things going on. I mean, you've given us this packet and spoke on all different programs. There's a lot more that's not listed here.
I was told I couldn't go that long, so.
Right.
I'm sorry, I have a sarcastic sense of humor, so I don't mean to offend anybody.
I don't see some things on the STAR program. I'm like, okay, I'm a proponent of that. And there's a lot of great programs there, great staff and great students that do things there. So there's a lot of wonderful things that the administration is doing, and the teachers, the staff, and continue to do. And that partnership, I think, is very important to know that that's what you guys are doing.
And I think one of the things that I didn't share, but like, I worked in other districts before here, the fact that our students in certain levels of support go out in community-based instruction every week. Like, how important is that to take what you learn in the classroom and learn to generalize those skills out in the community, right? And the fact that our seniors welcome our students into the pool once a week, we have kids go once a week into the pool at North, and our seniors in there welcome them, and they help them learn to swim, and it's like, what a great bonding system that is. And hats off to our seniors at North for doing that. I'm nothing against South, please, but I'm just saying, like, the seniors at North, like, I give them all the credit for doing that, for taking the time to take our kids in under their wings, and they have a buddy now, and it's just wonderful.
Mr. Secchi?
Thank you. This is, as everybody else said, this is a lot of information. I'm trying to, or I have been trying and kind of not totally able to reconcile what was on the screen with what you were talking about with what we have in front of us. And I think that's because there's so much.
Yes.
So yes, like Mr. Hidalgo, I'm going to go back and listen to this maybe a couple times, and I will probably have questions after that. I would like more. You mentioned a lot of different literacy programs. the letters training, Read 180, Aspire. I think there was another one that I didn't get down. So I guess somewhere in here, is there like a description of each one of these programs and who's getting what? Is that in here?
Who's getting what, but we can give you descriptions of each one of the programs.
That would be helpful.
Okay.
I think, there's a lot of things that were mentioned that, and maybe it's just me, but I'm kind of like, oh, well, I'd like to hear more about that, or I'd like to learn more about that. So maybe this is kind of an ongoing conversation. But definitely the reading programs. And then the speech and language review from the IU. So did they issue a report? Do we have a report?
They did issue a report.
Okay, are we gonna get to see that?
If you want it, sure.
I would love to see it.
I'm sorry.
And to hear a little bit more about it,
Yep.
yeah.
So, yeah, so we could do that, and we could, if you want to come back, then we could present that.
Awesome.
But I'm happy to share. I'm trying to truncate everything into one short session, but
Yeah.
I'm passionate about what I do, and so are my colleagues. We could obviously come. We want you to know what we're doing. I think it's
We want to
important.
know too, so that's great. I hope you'll always come back.
Reports, it's
Yeah.
probably better to come back.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it would take a good chunk of time, and we're happy to do that because we want you to feel what we've gotten out of that. And just so you know, after the report, we met with, Ms. Carl and I met with our speech people individually to share what came out of that report and what are we doing to move forward. And it's a work, I'm gonna give you honest, it's a work in progress, right? So we're changing a lot of things. Like I said, we want a universal schedule for all of our speech, whether you're teaching at elementary or middle or high school, right? We want a live log, so listen, life happens, and if someone goes out for maternity leave or something, Ms. Carl and I could go into that live log and say, this kid had X amount of services and X amount of sport, and then everyone should do it unified. So those are some of the things we're working on now.
Yeah. I mean, I can only speak for myself that, I'd love to dive deeper into quite a bit of this info. So, as one of 9, I would invite you to come back as many times as you're able to. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Polly?
Yeah, thank you. It's so much information. So in the meetings with the parents, a lot of the things that come up, I think almost in every single meeting, was creating like a handbook, because parents don't really know what all these are. They don't know what are the different programs, and these are people that they have kids, that utilize this. So at the same time, I recognize it may take a tremendous amount of work to create something like that. So if you could coordinate some of the demands of the board with what you were planning to do that came out of the meeting, and we schedule it in a way that we do not overload anyone, and at the same time, we provide the information to the parents and the board in a way that can be easier to navigate the system. That would be very helpful.
Right.
And I appreciate, this is like tremendous information. We've never received anything like that before. Thank you.
May I jump in on the handbook?
Yes.
So the board has had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Oberman, who you just appointed last Thursday, I think, as our new Director of Special Services. One of the things we've spoken to Dr. Oberman about through the interview process was that handbook, and in his current district, he created and implemented one. And in fact, at the Special Education Steering Committee last night, I was thrilled that he left the meeting in his current district when they were finished and joined us last night, and we spoke about that handbook. Because as Kyle talked about with these CPAC meetings, we have listened to every single voice that was present and every single piece of information and everything that was documented with the different color markers. That has all been uploaded on our website, and that's how those CPAC meeting agendas will be developed. So in addition to your question, Ms. Polly, about a handbook, that's already in the works with Dr. Oberman. The second is we also went to our staff developers and ask them to create a similar tool that will be an internal tool for our instructional support people to outline and define all the professional development opportunities that we offer and keep track of who has participated in once. As a support staff, members are required 20 hours a year of professional development. And we want to house that in one spot and collate and codify all the opportunities that we give to our support staff for the training. So as we're talking about this, one of the two is nearing completion, the internal one. And the second one, Dr. Oberman, and he'll be meeting with our individual supervisors, but he's poised and ready to bring that here to Council Rock.
Thank you, that's awesome.
Mr. Rosenbaum?
Thank you. Couple of questions. Can this be shared with the community?
With the community? I won't, let me read through it again before I say yes or no.
Okay.
I could probably redact it to the point where we can.
Right.
I don't know if that document in the form, I want to be honest and say, let me read through it again and see if there's anything in there that would be, yeah.
Okay. Because I think if you could do that.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if that's something that is worth doing every whatever period makes sense. So that would be interesting. And I really like the idea of the internal handbook to make sure that everybody inside Council Rock that's doing a lot of these wonderful things that we see here is fully aware of everything. And I also appreciate what you do and what this organization does, because as much I think as a society wants to categorize, I think what you do breaks through those defined lines. There aren't any defined lines in this field. So I think it's very difficult to express that. And so I'm encouraged about the idea of both the external and the internal handbook, but at the same point, I'm concerned because there's a lot of line crossing effectively, because not every individual is the same, not every individual needs the same support, et cetera. So I'm encouraged. I think this is moving in the right direction. Thank you.
I think you bring up a great point, is like the INIP is there for a reason, like, right. So, two children, even with the same disability, might not have the same needs, right? So we do really have to look at the individualization of that child services.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so maybe if after Dr. Cantor, you look at this, it's a 5-page document of achievements within or the current, I guess, initiatives or items that the Special Education Department has done. Once that is, adjusted in any way and with Dr. Sanko's approval, then could that be added to the Special Education tab along with, I think that would be a great place to add on to that tab in the district?
I've read it, and I think one of the things that we have to do before we put it there is make the language parent-friendly.
Right.
As Kyle said, we go around a lot of alphabet soup in education, so I think that would be our first look. So Kyle, I'll ask you to go back with the other supervisors to review it for what you just talked about, but also make sure it's end user friendly so our parents can easily understand it.
Okay.
Mr. Hidalgo?
Yeah. So if we are going to be putting something out like this, you started off by saying this is just a sample of achievements, and it's a big department, a lot of things going on, all the way down to the teachers and the assistants. So maybe perhaps, obviously it could be exhaustive or it could just be highlights. So there's a balance there, but just to know that probably more highlights, but basically, try to sum things up. But you don't want to say, hey, this is all we're doing either. You know what I mean?
Nope, I
look at it the other way.
Yep. It's not an exhaustive list.
Right, right. That's how you started it out. So I just wanted to mention that. Thanks.
Thank you. I think considering what Ms. Oseki said, and then also hearing you, thank you, Dr. Cantor, for coming to present, and I know last night at the steering committee, a lot of this conversation and a lot of the sharings of teachers and the directors in special education, they were all talking around this table and about all the things that are implementing. I think it would be nice, you know, in the next education committee meeting, when we have these special education updates, maybe take a section, maybe focus in on it, whether it's elementary level and we talk about English language arts and kind of talk about the programmings that we offer that's available. So not only for the board's knowledge, but also for families. And then, you know, move down the line, maybe then move on to secondary in different areas. That's a lot, right? And to talk about individualized and talking about the acronyms, that can be part of like the process as we move through and planning ahead to meetings, kind of break it down and delve into it. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. It's my
Thank you,
pleasure.
Pam.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for
Have a good
staying.
day.
Good night, Pam.
Okay, moving on. This evening, we are asking the board if they wish to formally commission, I guess is the word I'll use, a study of the high school schedule. As we have discussed at previous education committee meetings, the district last examined the high school schedule back in 2019. At that time, a district level committee comprised of 4 chair people and 25 members, stakeholder members, explored possible changes to the high school schedule, which, as we have mentioned, is a schedule that has remained relatively untouched for decades. So you can look at that one of 2 ways, as a positive or potentially somewhat negative. Many of the motivating factors prompting the examination back in 2019 are still at play today. So namely a desire to give students more opportunities and more choices within their schedule. That's a huge prompting consideration. Consideration of embedding intervention or enrichment time within the academic day, within the schedule. You saw that a little bit reflected when Mr. Francis was talking about the elementary schedule. And potentially reducing student stress through a change in the schedule. So, as many of you know, the current schedule offers 6 instructional periods at the high school, each running about 55 minutes in length. So if you think of each period as a credit, students have an opportunity to achieve 6 credits in a given year, and therefore 24 credits over their 9 through 12 high school journey. Currently, board requirement is that students achieve 23 out of the 24 credits in order to achieve their diploma. And then those 23 credits have to be within certain designated disciplines. For example, you need 4 English credits, 3 social studies, 3 science, 3 math, 2.5 arts and humanities, 1.5 health and PE, 6 required electives. So they're designated credits that you need to achieve. So intuitively, I'm just going to give you a quick example. Intuitively, offering a 7-period or an 8-period day could broaden credit opportunities. So if you went for a 7-period day, that 24 credits that we currently have would be 7 credits a year over 4 years, 28 credit opportunities. If we opted for an 8-period day, you'd be looking at 8 times 4, 32 credit opportunities. And again, intuitively, I think when you first look at that at first blush, well, that's a wonderful thing to increase credit opportunities. However, the only caution I would draw, because there's no right or wrong in changing schedules, and that was something that our educational consultant, Dr. Reddig, who is kind of the guru nationwide on schedules, would often remind the committee, like, and I think it was even mentioned tonight, if you put something in, you're necessarily taking something out. So just in the example I just used with 6, 7, and 8 periods, if you increase your periods, yep, I increased opportunities, check that box, that's a good thing, right? However, your instructional minutes per period, again, intuitively go down. So here's the example. If we have 6 periods right now, about 55 minutes in length, we're running, each course is about 9,900 instructional minutes per course. If we drop that down to 7 periods, now your 9,900 minutes per year goes to about 8,500, 8,600. If you go to 8, now you're more at like 7,500 minutes. What does that mean? It could equate to about 30 to 35 instructional hours a year per course. There's no perfect science on what is the right number. Obviously, kids learn differently, they don't learn at a different pace. Ultimately, we want to make sure that whatever we land on, there's sufficient time to cover the standards and to teach and learn adequately, which is not an exact science. So that's just one variable that a committee would explore. Other considerations that the committee would grapple with would be things called student load, which is basically, well, how many courses does a student take in a given day or a given cycle, right? And what is kind of the sweet spot for that? We would also examine teacher load. How many courses does a teacher instruct in a given day or a given cycle? So right now, our high school teachers are teaching 5 out of 6 courses. That's a fairly efficient. When you start getting into some other considerations of schedule, you may lose some of that efficiency. If it was a 6 for 8, for example, obviously that's just a different proportion. So these are just some of the considerations that a committee would examine. You can go to the next slide. Moving forward, obviously cost would be a huge consideration. There are collective bargaining agreement considerations, things to grapple with. Whether or not to have a unit lunch or no unit lunch. Unit lunch has received some level of popularity amongst high schools. What that is, basically, saying what we have currently. We have a traditional lunch period right now. It's basically a half hour for students to eat. And it starts at 10:45 and it runs until 1:15. 30 minutes, you run through your lunch period. A unit lunch, and there are different ways to do it, but typically the way you see it, generically, is it's a 1 hour block of time in the middle of the day where students eat for a half hour and then they go for intervention and enrichment time during the other half hour, and then it's kind of flip-flopped. So you can imagine, I'll just take one of our high schools, South as an example, with a 2,000 student population, running 5 lunches with 30 minutes, the cafeteria size were about 400 to 600 per lunch period. If you do half of the student population, you're talking about 1,000 students eating at once, which the cafeteria would not be able to accommodate. So you start talking about things like kiosks where you would offer food maybe in the auditorium, tabletops in lobbies. These are schools that we've did these unit lunch. It actually starts to begin to resemble a little bit more of a college campus atmosphere. So those are all the considerations that go into looking at a high school schedule. The last time that we looked at it, I think we went to 20 different school districts, and we were looking at unit lunches, we were looking at 7-period days, we were looking at 8-period days. In terms of envisioning the roadmap unfolding, just a few of the possibilities would be, if the board so desires, we would form a committee selection and formation would happen hopefully in the spring. We would develop a rough timeline. You're probably looking at a 2 to 3 year process, so that timeline would be rough, certainly at the outset. Certainly we would consider whether or not we would want to engage an outside consultant like we did the last time. I don't even know if Dr. Reddick would be available or not. The committee would define its purposes very clearly, really start with the why. Why are we changing the schedule? What are the boxes that we really want to check if we're going to do this? Because this would be a major endeavor. Form appropriate subcommittees, implement whatever stakeholder surveys to make sure that we solicit information from the community, from the parents, most importantly the students, about what they're looking for in schedules. Make those site visitations to surrounding school districts. Of course, update the board with public presentations. I would envision town hall meetings at both of the high schools, continued refinement of the process, and then ultimately, at some point, bring forth a recommendation or possibly 2 to the board for consideration. Now that recommendation could be status quo. It could be after a study to say, you know what, we actually think that where we are is really appropriate for our school community. If there was a recommendation that involved changes, the next step beyond that would be testing that schedule more in a beta environment through our school information system just making sure that we work out any of the unintended consequences and obstacles that we may face, and then decide how we would then implement from there. So I think, you know, from my perspective, I think we're ready, willing, and able, and kind of poised to begin that process. Another consideration that I was asked to address in this agenda was school start times, and it can be related to a change in a high school schedule, or it could be a mutually exclusive endeavor as well. So I apologize, I kind of put more questions than answers in terms of the school start time regarding consideration for whether this is something we want to pursue right now. I think that, you know, things that we consider are we able to study both of these concurrently? Do we have the bandwidth and capacity to do that? Does it carry the same level of importance for the stakeholders involved as the high school schedule? I guess importance isn't the right word there. But I will tell you that even as a high school principal for 15 years, the high school schedule was something that was spoken about by students, teachers, and parents. The school start times is a very important topic. I just didn't receive that level of dialogue with that particular topic. Is it something that potentially we could marry, in that if we decided to go ahead with the high school scheduling committee, could we designate specifically one subcommittee for school start times? Because there is potential overlap. I think I used the example of a Montgomery County district who recently changed their high school schedule, and it involved a change in start times. It doesn't always have to, but this one did. And essentially what they did was they moved their intervention enrichment time to the beginning of the day, so that students could come in if they require that extra assistance and support, or if they did not need that, they would start later. So that ended up being a marrying of the two. And that's certainly something that we could do with subcommittee work if we explore the high school schedule. But I'm certainly open to any suggestions on how to, you know, potentially pursue that.
Okay, so I think at the pre-agenda meeting, kind of looking just that initial exploration, and I think Mr. Funk, you had said that you wanted kind of that runway to start creating a stakeholder committee to just kind of start this dialogue and discussion and initial exploration. So I know he wanted to get kind of some head nods, just go ahead and start that, or no, this isn't going to go anywhere. And so I'd just like to go around the table then and hear from each board member.
Okay. That's wonderful, thank you. You know, I've been a big proponent of having this discussion for a long time. And I'm fully aware, as you put it, Mr. Fong, that this is a major endeavor. So we wouldn't take it lightly. We would be building on some information that we accumulated back, it's almost 5 years now. So at least we have that starting point. I'm quite aware that it's a major endeavor. I heard you say 2 to 3 years, so we're not saying, gosh, we need this done in a year and drop everything, because that's not possible. I'm fully in favor of having this exploration, and we could end up, as you say, at the status quo. And if we do, then we've done our, as people like to say, due diligence and looked at our schedule. So I'm fully in favor. The other thing is, as far as the start time is concerned, I think all the questions you ask are valid. Is it important a priority? Can this be done at the same time? Does it make sense to do it at the same time? And to me, there's a fourth question is there the county-wide interest in doing this? Because I remember when we had extensive discussion before COVID, that was a considerable factor, that there was momentum across the county to do this. We don't want to do it on our own. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I don't think, based on the way I understand it, it's not feasible to do it on your own. So I'm 100% in favor of exploring the high school schedule. I am uncertain as to whether or not we need to be doing the start time exploration at the same time. It's just a question that I've asked because it seems to make sense. But I'm undecided on that one.
Yeah, I'm gonna use a word that Ms. Gary used tonight, sequence. And I'm concerned about the sequence, not so much the question of earlier start times or block scheduling, but it's the sequence of the other things that this district is taking at this time. And where do we want to put our priorities? Things that we haven't talked about at all. I mean, and I guess this would be a part of the discussion as it relates to both of those items. I mean, for example, like, just right now, we're working on a budget for next year. We haven't even, like, we have full day in kindergarten, we don't even know what that looks like yet. You know, we're getting it, you know, like you said, there's probably gonna be a little bit of roadblocks, but we're implementing it, and hopefully it'll be with no roadblocks and everything's nice. But we don't even know what that looks like, and this is something that's gonna start in September. We need 3 new principals and 2 at the senior level. We have a budget coming up, we have a teacher's contract coming up, we have support staff, we have our ABM contract. These are all within this year and or next year. These initiatives we're talking about are going to cost a lot of money. And I guess maybe that's one of the things we do to say, like, how much money do we have? But I think we have to do things in sequence and decide what is our priorities. For example, we just had a facilities meeting where we talked about a master facilities plan, where there's going to be a limited amount of dollars and what we're going to do with those dollars. And in addition to even that, like, these things all, like I said, these are initiatives that are going to cost, you know, a lot of money that we would have to consider. I'm just not sure whether or not now is the time to consider. Let's maybe see how some of these other initiatives turn out, or what they look like, before maybe we tie your hands too much, because I worry about, you know, how much time we spend for, like you said, we're going to form a committee. I'm sure the administration is going to be a part of that committee. And one of the things we need to decide, and I said this before at our last time, I think our most important initiative right now to decide, and I think we should decide that first, whether, before we do anything else, is what we're going to do with our 6th graders and middle schools. Because I don't know if we can do, you know, I guess you can always say, yeah, we can do everything at the same time, and maybe we can, but I don't know whether or not we're going to give it the just due that it merits. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe we should go around the room and say, how important is that 6th grade? Because if we're going to look into a high school scheduling, then maybe that 6th grade initiative of the middle schools gets put on the back burner. Like I said, you know, when you say full steam ahead, I mean, I agree with some caution. I know it's going to take some time. We'll see what the board says. I would actually like to see, though, us to make some decisions on what we're doing with our facilities and what we're doing with our 6th grade before we say, what are we going to do with this? I'm just worried that sometimes we might be biting off more than we can chew.
Mr. Hidalgo?
Mr. Funk, we've been here before.
Yes, we have.
So where do I start? So right now, we're in kindergarten, and that we're implementing that, and that's really great. We also have some capacity issues in 6th grade. This is some big information it's big initiatives that need to be taken. Being part of with Mr. Tate, being part of the last process, I was, I definitely wasn't for earlier start times. Then middle school goes earlier or whatever, you know. And then the scheduling, I wasn't quite 100% set on scheduling, and I could get into why. When you talk about if you add more courses to kids, especially like, and so you know, kids that like to take a lot of rigor end up if you're already at 6 classes, sometimes you're up till 3 or 4 in the morning doing your work pretty regularly, especially in 11th grade. And so if you add an extra course, these kids will not stop. You give them the opportunity, they're gonna take, now they have 8 courses. So this little thing I said before, if you're gonna have more courses and obviously the workload, you take it home. And there's not really, it's not managed, it's not coordinated, so sort of like what we're doing with Atlas, I'd like to see if we are gonna go down this route, adding more courses, that we assign a time or a value to an assignment, so that when a student gets set an assignment, especially at the higher, AP courses and stuff, that there's a time value to that, so that maybe the teacher can see at the end of the day, it's gonna take them an hour, but they got 8 courses, maybe there's 5 courses they have it, and they got 5 hours of work to do, and they'll do it, but that burns them out. Talk about student wellness. That's one thing that got me with thinking of changing schedule to add more courses, just so my student doesn't have to pay for extra credit at community college, so they can take phys ed or maybe even another course that they want in their day. That system works. I don't think we changed the whole system for that, so tell me why we're doing it, what we're improving, what's the necessity, is it worth all of the, so before we even get into the committees, I'd like to see the studies and the contra studies, not studies, I hate studies, sorry, but, ideas, what pros and cons, and then people seeing it a different way, and have these conversations, maybe educate the board before we send you out, because I'm very concerned about the wasting administrative bandwidth on more initiatives when we've already talked about everything that Mr. Hickey, is that your name? Yeah. Mr. Hickey, this guy who's sitting right to me, said. And that's basically it. So, I mean, obviously, is this like Rock Block all over again? We're gonna start from scratch?
Well, Rock Block was the unit lunch aspect.
It was a big selling point. That was a big selling
If you're
point.
examining schedules, that would be something you examine, whether or not you would want a unit lunch or a more traditional lunch.
So what exactly are we fixing by changing the schedule?
The rationale behind considering a change in the schedule primarily would be for increasing credit opportunities and choice for students.
Which
Expanding
could
the
cost,
period.
which can help some, but it will definitely cause more stress to those who don't know how to manage to say no to extra work.
I think all the points you're raising, those are things that we grapple with. And again, not a lot of right or wrong answers necessarily in that. And I guess the lines get a little blurred when you talk about bringing more information back before committee work, or should the committee do that? It's hard to say. But I get it. And I think one thing that I would say in terms of our 6-period schedule that we have seen is we do have students who go seek alternative credit. Students can get 1 alternative credit per year, so a maximum of 4 alternative credits at an outside accredited institution. For example, Bucks County Community College. So we have seen a number of our students seek to do that. If you're getting between the two schools, 400 requests for those to take a course at Bucks County Community College, I'll use that as an example. And the rationale, they say, well, why are you taking a course at Bucks County Community College? To free up room in my schedule so that I can take X, Y, or Z. So that would be just one rationale for potential exploring. But yes, there are trade-offs in all of this.
So just to say, I don't want you to come back and do a presentation publicly of information. What I would like is maybe some reading lists to educate myself, or you could just point me to some links and stuff like that. But as far as going back and visiting this and opening up space for, opening up time for people to do an extra course, Dr. Thorwart had mentioned that PE is not mandatory, and you could somehow, I think that's something, or maybe I'm wrong, because I know we're doing PE at college, I mean, at Bucks, because you want to free up course for free up time for one of these other courses, but I thought there was something where we could actually scratch PE.
State has certain requirements with disciplines about how many credits you need.
But you can do those in the earlier, I don't think it had to go all the way to 12th grade though.
Right, our credit requirement is 1.5 credits of health and PE. The state, I believe, is 1.0.
So 1 year out of 4.
Right. So when you say 1 year, again, it's easiest to think of as one course is 1 year, but you can have semester courses. So you could have a 0.5 and a 0.5 and a 0.5 that add up to 1.5.
So really, I just can't, she never took, like if my student took a PE course, it's because they never took one in high school?
I'm sorry?
So if someone goes and does a physical education summer class to get that requirement, is that because they never took phys ed once from 9th, 10th, 11th?
They're just making the decision to take that course into the accredited entity.
But you don't.
They don't need to take the PE here in
So a
Council Rock.
lot of students in high school don't take
That
PE.
That's a popular course for seeking alternative credit.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, I'm going down a rabbit hole. But my point is, that is huge, and I'm just not in favor of diving in, throwing this on you guys right now, just, I'll be honest.
Sorry.
Yeah, I want to kind of just go through a couple of bullet points that blend between administration load as well as board understanding as well as community understanding. Before I can even be on board or against the idea of the exploration. I'm hearing that there's an exploration, and then we know that there's the schedule if the exploration is successful. So decoupling that is of interest. So do you have an idea of what the cost for this exploration, as well as Mr. Tate said 2 to 3 years? Is that the estimated cost? I'm sorry, the timeline for the explanation?
I didn't say that. Mr. Fung said 2 to 3 years.
I said 2 to 3 years.
To correct the record.
Yeah, this is why I'm asking the question. I didn't hear that in the presentation. I wanted to understand what that was.
I think the struggle that I'm at, first of all, one person is not a committee.
Right.
When you talk about a major endeavor like a high school schedule, that's why you would do a major committee to explore all these things. So I'm even hesitant to say 2 to 3 years, because I don't know, but that would be the purpose of the exploration. And it's hard to say, even project cost involved without getting the committee first to say, all right, what is it that we want to do? Do you want to hire a consultant? Should we petition the board for that? Do you want to do site visits? What are the estimated costs? How much do you think it's going to be for substitutes? When can we get together to meet about this? Should we do a stakeholder survey? Is there a cost to the stakeholder survey? Oh, you like block scheduling? Wait a second, we're going to have to do professional development for that. Do we have to rewrite the curriculum? I won't know the answers to those questions, and the committee won't know until we dive into the work.
I'm glad you said that, because that really defines how this is an open black hole. And it helps to sort of adjust my understanding, I think the community's understanding of both the cost for the exploration, which can't be identified, as well as the cost for the change, if it would be successful, which certainly can't be identified, the timeline of the exploration, which can't be really identified, but we all know that it's not going to happen in a series of months. This is more like years that we're talking about. And then that rolls into what is the timeline for implementation. Probably also can't be identified. I like the fact that you started with the notion of explain why. What are we trying to accomplish? I think that's very, very, very important. And there were some good bullet points up there as far as what should be considered. Ones that in their own isolation, probably few people would disagree with. If you just look at those things in isolation, I think few people would say, no, I don't want that, right? Everybody's gonna say, absolutely, more choice, right? Less stress. What was the other one? I think it's right there, but,
Intervention.
yeah, more intervention. And we heard from the elementary schedule and some of this conversations, how important intervention has been to an individual student. By the time they get to high school, your point regarding start time, maybe they don't need that intervention. On the other hand, maybe they still want it, even though they don't need it because they want to excel further. And that's nice to have that option. The duration of the day. This schedule, would that extend? Obviously, we probably don't have a lot of room, if any, to reduce it. So would this extend the duration of the day, or is this keeping the day the same?
Well, high school schedule change is primarily, you're not changing the size of the size of the pie being the traditional high school day of 7:33 to 2:15. If you did late start times, that would change that.
Right, but theoretically, you could change the schedule, and then if the board wanted to, it could just shift it a little bit later if you want to couple in start times. Or, as you mentioned in the example, have that intervention in the front to address that. So these could be decoupled. They don't have to go hand in hand. And so I think the further decoupling is exploration, change, and start time. It's almost like we're dealing with three decoupled pieces. Do you agree, or?
I don't know if I'm following this.
Well, there's the notion of seeking board approval to conduct an exploration that started in 2018 and 2019 and has been put on the shelf. And now we're going to come back into it about 5 years later. So that's one thing. The next thing is, okay, that happened. We can't identify how long it's going to be, how much time it's going to take with administration, and how much it's going to cost. It's a bit of a black hole. But the next thing after that, if that's successful, is the actual cost and the time of the schedule change. It's another piece. And then the third piece would be the start time. Do we just shift the second piece along down the line? That's why I said 3.
Okay. I'm following that.
Right? So I think that's important for both the board and the community to understand that we don't have to put this all together. This could be 3 different things. And I agree with sequence a lot. I think that it's helped us in the facility plan, the master plan, and I think that it's contributed a lot to just the proper way to go through things to get the best result. And that's what we want here, is the proper way to get the best result for our kids, for the teachers, and for the community. So understanding the problems and understanding that we're trying to fix these is a good place to start. Even if it gets, to your point, back to, hey, we should stay with the 6. And then the other question is, does this require, or when we're talking about school schedule, does that necessitate the notion of changing the duration of a course? In other words, going from 55 minutes to, say, 90 or some other metric. It could or it could not. Exactly. That's, I think, something that all of us as board should consider, is that there's both a big black hole to a lot of this, and there's a lot of options within it, which I think is exciting and interesting and compelling. But I think we should all wrap our heads around 2018, 2019, updates till then, evaluate the why, and understand that we're really kind of talking about 3 things that may be in sequence, that may be in a linear sequence. I don't know. So I need to understand a lot of this before I can decide whether this is worth pursuing or saying no. Because as I said, you look at these whys that you put up, who could say no to that? But at the same point, you need to understand a little bit more about this to understand, do I want to say yes?
Just for clarification, for the head nod, is that a yes or a no?
There's no head nod at this point. This
So
is
you're-
way too.
So you're
this is-
abstaining from, okay.
This is way too early for any of us to give a head nod, in my opinion, without understanding these things from a serious point of view. This is something that has been discussed in the board, but these 9 of us haven't. And I think that there's a lot of different community people with kids in school from 5 years ago. One of them is my oldest son, who isn't in the school anymore, but he was back then. So there's a lot of change to the student population. There's a lot of change to the teacher population. As Mr. Hickey mentioned, there's a lot of change to the administration of this current Council Rock School District. Mr. Sanko, I understand there's roughly 300 interviews in this year alone that he's sat on. So there's a huge change. And then Mr. Hickey pointed out about principals. So there's a lot of changes that's happened. I think that it's important to understand what has been done, but we also need to understand that we're different now. And maybe that's a yes and maybe it's a no. But without understanding these things, how can you, I think, in any serious and cognizant manner, give a head nod at this point? I mean, we just started talking about this as a board. So I'm not ready to give a head nod one way or the other. And if I'm pushed to do it, I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing for this district, my constituents, the taxpayers, and the students and the teachers. And without more information, I don't feel that I can do that at this point. It's too preliminary for me.
Okay, Ms. Horner.
So, to begin, I'm curious on who brought this back up. Who brought this back up to push this initiative?
Well, the high school schedule, I think, has been an ongoing conversation, and we were asked to also look at the restart times.
So, some board members asked? Some board, okay. I'm very concerned about timing. We heard a lot of things going on. You guys have a lot of moving parts in this district going on currently. Full-day kindergarten, master plan. Got a new special services director who's got to get up to speed. IT director is going to be hired. You've got the teachers' negotiations. You've got to do daily, day in, day out to make this district work. I just don't see how we can do this right now. We can put this on you to make you put another initiative in place where we got to get full-day kindergarten through. And you've done a lot. So I don't see right now that this would be timing. This is not timing, a good timing. Okay, thank you. Ms. Stone?
Yes. So I first feel that because this is an educational issue, that we should be taking our guidance from administration. So if they feel that this is important enough to review, and if they feel that they have the time to do it, then I would support them moving forward. That's the first thing. I don't think that we should be telling you exactly how to deal with educational matters. The second thing is listening to Tammy tonight talking about these STEEL requirements and changes in curriculum. I think we are making some changes there as well. And then when I look at if additional changes to the high school schedule, I'm wondering who that would really benefit. Is that going to, you said there are a lot of kids that are going and taking courses at Bucks County. So I'm thinking that I would love to put in new courses if I thought that it's going to benefit the majority of the students. But if it's going to only benefit a smaller group, then I would want to stay focused on how to make it better for the majority of students and not take time away from their math and their reading and their science by reducing the number, because I think it's we have to educate the bulk of those students that sometimes sit in the middle and are forgotten, so to speak. But now, when you talk about timing and later start times for high school. I see that as a benefit for the majority of the students, as science has and research has shown that these older kids, their bio clocks are that they need extra sleep in the morning. So I mean, if you're going to look at the betterment of the majority of the students, I would like to move forward with investigating start times. And I don't, and of course, if the administration thinks they could, and I don't think that's as big a load to examine that piece.
Wait, so just to clarify again with this whole head nod going
Yeah,
around
so-
the table, so.
I'd like to see move forward with investigating start times, particularly how it would affect, I know there's an effect on after-school activities and all of that. Is that something that the district is looking at, as it was brought up here, and we could go and investigate that piece? I would like to move forward on that piece.
Okay, so what about the schedule? So I know one of the options that Mr. Funk had stated is looking at the schedule, exploring the schedule generally, and then looking at the later start times as a subcommittee of that, potentially. Whether it's, could be together or separate, we still don't quite know yet, right? Because this is the whole point of the exploration.
My feeling is I would rather see them separated, and I think that we could deal with later start times as a separate issue, and it's a smaller issue, I think, and one that's proven to be beneficial to all the students. Of course, it has all the downsides too, and it affects community and families and so on, but I think that's what, if you're taking a census, that's where I would want to move forward. If the administration says, yes, we would like to move forward with this schedule, then I would support them.
Okay, so I'm gonna put you.
I would not demand that as a.
Okay, so I'm gonna, okay. Might have to come back to you, but Ms. Oseki.
Okay. I guess, just to make it really difficult, I pretty much disagree with everything Linda just said. No, I don't. I think that I agree with the science between kids sleeping later, and that's a priority. I disagree that they should be separated. I think for me, you talked about 2 or 3 years as a timeline. I would rather us take it slow and have it be 4 or 5 years and do them both. I think that it's hard for kids to go through these transitions. It's hard for families. I'd rather just, whatever, 2028, 2029, or 2029, 2030, like that's like a school year where everything's going to change. And we have time to plan for that. Families have time for it. And to Ed's point, I think it's a really good point about, other districts in the county coming along with us. And so if we put it out and we say, okay, we're going to start a committee, it's going to be a slow process, maybe in 29, 30, we're going to aim for some changes, and hey, Central Bucks, or hey, Penridge, or, Pennsbury, or whatever, come along with us. Like, let's aim for all making this change together. I guess Pennsbury's already doing it, but regardless. So that's my feeling, is that I would rather have it slow and inclusive of both. I certainly would support a committee. I don't have a problem with that. I think more information is better. I know we've had a lot of feedback from the community already, and I hope that continues. We've had emails, we've had public comment, we have people here tonight. So I don't have a preconceived notion about what the community supports, but I think it's a very worthwhile thing to take a deep dive in. I know that PE is a problem. I heard that over and over and over and over again when I was campaigning. not PE specifically, but like that kids have to take PE at the community college. So I know that that's a problem. Maybe Mr. Hidalgo's right, and we just lower it from 1.5 credits to 1 credit, and it's an easy problem to fix, but maybe that's the outcome of the committee. You know, maybe we're making everything more complicated than it has to be. I have no idea. And then the other thing that wasn't mentioned, and I would be interested in, is an advisory period. I know that we talked about that like way back, like that, you know, having each child have a relationship with a teacher, you know, can help with their adjustment and social skills and all that kind of thing. And so if we are going to go down this, you know, that would be on the list, as you say, like what are the must-haves on the list? That would be something that I would want to see on the list. And I'm also interested to hear you say that maybe we would add a period and go to a 7-period schedule or something like that versus a block schedule, because we've talked a lot about block scheduling. I don't know that I'm supportive of block scheduling. There are some just concerns I have out of the gate about that. So I think it's interesting to see, maybe we just make each class shorter. That's it.
So for the record, 2018 to 2025, it's 7 years, it's not 5 years. And you know how many things change in research over time, and 7 years is a long time in research. So even if we're gonna look at the work that was done in 2018, I'm sure some of it will be relevant, but not all of it, because you can, I know there are schools right now that they offer more credits and they have less subjects per day. So there is a lot out there that so you don't have to offer like 7 or 8 classes. I mean, that would be very taxing to the students to offer so many per day, because how much homework, how many transitions, and so on. So, and we have not changed, we have not looked into that for like 50 years, right? So, I mean, we are in the business of educating. So don't we have to, like, every once in a while, evaluate what we're doing and then make sure that we're doing great? Yes, we keep it. We are not. Maybe we need to make some changes. So we have to study. And by studying, we don't spend tax dollars. We owe it to our students to study and make sure that whatever we offer is the best thing for them, not for us. And I know some people may have to work a little harder, but I mean, that's what you do. And you pick and choose what are the initiatives that you think it's worth. So if you don't think it's worth doing it, I don't think you would even have the presentation today. I'm sure that our students deserve to know if there are better options for them out there. So with regard to the start times, I mean, the research is very solid that at that age, they tend to go to bed later. And so it would be more beneficial to start later. And I know there is pros and cons in terms of scheduling and so on, but again, we have to study. I mean, we had an email a few months ago, there is a whole organization on that, and they've taken studies and they've done presentations, so why don't we have them come over and make a presentation to us, to you as administration, to find out the latest. So yes, we have to study, we have to see what is out there and what is the best way for us to offer it. And as you said, Mr. Funk, it's not going to be tomorrow, right? It's going to take time. And this is what we do. We study, we deliberate, we figure out if it's worth it or not, how to change it, and then if it is worth it, we go ahead and do it. Again, for the benefit of our students. because students first always, Dr. Sanko, right? So I think you know where I stand.
Thank you. Okay, so I think the exploration of the high school schedule, as Ms. Polly had stated, that based upon the 2018-2019 school year, then you referenced the stakeholder committee even going out to doing all those 20 schools for site visits and looking at their block or shared lunch time. Yeah, I think the exploration of the high school schedule and a later start time, I just want to be clear, it does not automatically mean block scheduling, or does it mean that we're doing either of those things at all in the near future. There's no way this can take off and be implemented next year or the year after. I think I imagine this just like, in some essence, like full day kindergarten, asking for that initial runway, as Mr. Funk, you had said, to get the approval from the board to just start the exploration, get that stakeholder committee. For me, sitting around, hearing every board member around this table, they want more information. And I think that's exactly what you're asking for, Mr. Funk, is to go back and get that information. But as you stated yourself, you're only one person. You're not able to get all this information out to us. So I envision that to be much like the rollout of full day kindergarten, where you create that stakeholder committee. It doesn't come at a cost at this point. It's you're in the committee, and I'm sure stakeholders from the community to do that initial work, and you'll come back and present. I'm positive this will be a careful, thorough, considerate exploration. It does not mean that we're flipping elementary school schedule to a high school schedule for later start time, because at this point, we don't know. There could be any options at this point. As Ms. Polly had referenced, it's been, I don't know, over 40 years. So the work started in 2018, 2019 for a reason from the administration, whether it's the current administration, some of the same administration or not. I think it's, as Ms. Polly had stated, we owe it to our students to take a look at this, whether or not at the end of the day, along this process of exploration, that you come back to us and decide, okay, it's not worth it. We see, based upon the initial exploration or what we've come to so far, this is what we present, and we think the best option at this point is not to continue further exploration. Or maybe just work on the scheduling, or maybe just work on the later start times, or continue with the subcommittee. I, for one, like the idea of I support the exploration. I think it's due time. I know Ms. Tammy Gary sat here and said how the state of Pennsylvania requires a curriculum review from legislation every 10 years, and we haven't looked at our schedule in over 40. Things change, times change. I know she's also come to us with things like financial literacy, which is going to be a course requirement from the state starting next year. Where does that fit into the schedule? We have modern band that I know we just added to the schedule. There's so many things changing and that are evolving over the course of the several years. And Ms. Tammy also talked about additional, changes coming up to more of the curriculum for high school. So I think it's beneficial. I don't see this as a black hole that would, to me, implies that there's no end. And for me, this would be kind of getting out of that black hole and trying to figure it out. In terms of sequence, I think if we did everything in sequence here in the district, it would take us 100 years to get anything done. Ms. Binda, Mr. Rapp wouldn't I see at this point part of administration, part of cabinet that would be part of Mr. Funk's committee at this point. They have finance, they have facilities. I don't foresee it taking up every cabinet member or administrator a whole lot of time at this point. We don't quite know. One of the very specific questions I asked Mr. Funk and Dr. Sanko, and by the way, we had discussed this in December's Education Committee as well, so this is not the first time we've had this discussion at this table. I asked you, Mr. Funk and Dr. Sanko, does the administration have the interest, the desire, and the bandwidth to do this? And your response to me was, I guess I'll just let you speak for yourself.
I think we probably initially responded that we serve at the will of the board. Not back to you.
Right.
But, it's one of those things when you talk about, and I think I've said this before at Education Committee, large district level initiatives. They're worthy topics. they're worthy, educationally, I get excited about talking about some of these things. But it is always a balance between, being fiscally responsible, making sure that you have the capacity to do your due diligence and study it properly with fidelity, so that ultimately whatever recommendations come forth are things that are credible and meaningful. Yeah, that's administration. So there's no easy answers to how you prioritize, I think everything that's been said around the table, I can agree with pieces of all of it. And that's not even, that's the truth. I mean, you're talking about, we're negotiating a collective bargaining agreement. We have a capital plan. We have full-day kindergarten being implemented. There are a lot, that doesn't mean you stop being innovative and continue to push for continuous improvement, but you do strike a balance. And it's hard to say, Dr. Senko, Mr. Funk, what is the balance? What is the priority?
Right.
And I think that is why that we grapple with things as a school community. I think that's why we have surveys. I think that's why we have committees. I do think there are times when districts can bite off too much, but those are difficult thresholds to define. Very difficult thresholds to define.
But in this initial exploration, which is what you had asked for the head nods, you had asked for the initial exploration that you'd like to build a stakeholder committee to start that initial work, to answer some of these larger questions. And
I'm sorry.
No, I'll stop there.
No, I recall the question, do we have the bandwidth to form a committee and explore it?
Right.
I believe the answer to that, and I think administratively, we could easily say yes to that. We have the bandwidth to explore it. When you talk about implementation, that I think is a totally separate question.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think if nothing else, this board has learned that through our effort, and particularly Nicole and team's effort on the full-day kindergarten. Some of the things Al talked about, just if you look at a high school schedule change, like we didn't even start talking about curriculum mapping and the PD, that if you're gonna go from a 55-minute to a 90-minute block or anywhere in between if you don't land on on a full block schedule. So do we have the capacity to go and take a look at this? I think we do. I think we have people in our organization that would be excited about looking at this. I know I was part of that work in a different role in what year was it, 18?
You were one of the 4 chair people. It was myself, you, Jason, and Barry Desko were the 4 chair people.
And I think we had 35 members or so, or what number did you use?
25.
25 members on the committee. And I think that, I don't know that we've had this schedule 50 years, but I can guarantee we've had it 36 years. Like Al said, we're always looking for continuous improvement. And if this is gonna get information to help us help kids, I think we can explore it, but I wanna be clear that there's a huge difference between exploration and implementation.
Absolutely.
And this is getting to be overused at this point, but even the exploration of this will touch every arm of the district, from transportation to finances, to facilities, to, curriculum instruction and assessment, and all the others I didn't mention.
Eventually.
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 But even in the exploration.
Yes. All right, so right now I just want to go back to Mr. Roosevelt, if you want to still stay as your question mark.
Well, I think that it's important that we listen to each other and hear each other. And I think it's also important that this district doesn't conflate things. A schedule and the curriculum are 2 separate things that we shouldn't conflate. So because we haven't looked at our schedule, which is a start time and what fits in that and the end time, like we saw in the mock schedule, does not mean that the school is teaching what the school taught 38 years ago in those particular blocks. So I think that I don't believe this board should be communicating to the community that schedule and curriculum are the same thing, and and these need to be looked at. I also think that 8 to 10 hours of sleep and start time is another conflation. If we were to do a study and find out that the majority of people wear sunglasses when it's sun shining out, it does not, it's the difference between causation and correlation. It doesn't mean that if the majority of people put their sunglasses on, the sun is going to magically rise. In the same way, if we change the start time, it doesn't magically mean that all the kids are going to get a little extra sleep. And that's the reality of it. I agree, kids need to get more sleep. I agree 8 to 10 hours is a good thing to make people happy, most effective, most efficient and productive. But just because we change the start time isn't gonna, and that's for everybody, not just kids. So that's a whole separate thing. And this is why I was initially discussing decoupling these. It's a lot easier to get a head nod if we break these things out and understand what it is. I can't write a blank check for something for this district if I don't understand what it's gonna cost the community, what it's gonna cost the district. I can't write that blank check. And I think that it's different for studying the start time versus studying the schedule versus studying a block schedule and changing hours. I think, and actually doing the schedule change, I think all of those are separate things, as Dr. Sanko just articulated. So if you're trying to get me to do a head nod for one, I want to understand what I'm agreeing to in that blank check. Are we talking about an exploration of the schedule? Are we talking about an exploration of the start time? Are we talking about an exploration of something else within that? That's what I need to understand. And in order to do that, I'm looking for cost and time. Now, to do the time and the cost for just evaluating the high school schedule, is there any sort of parameters that we can put on that understanding? Is that the 2 to 3 years just to evaluate the start time? Because I agree.
Schedule or start time?
Both. Are these put together or are they different?
No, I would say, again, there's the consideration that I put out there in the form of a question, a way to kind of kill two birds with one stone would be to have a subcommittee of the high school schedule explore start time, which potentially could be an efficient use of our time. The 2 to 3 years, again, that's just spitballing in terms of exploration time based on even our work in 2018, 2019. I mean, what I can add is some educational considerations for the conversation, but it's school start time. There's 500, unlike full day kindergarten, when I think the statistic that was used was 87.5% of school districts were full day kindergarten. School start times, the last research I read, it was about 40 of the school districts had made a move of the 500. It just hasn't received as much critical mass. There has been conversations, like Mr. Tate mentioned, the school start time, doing it as more of a concerted group effort, whether that is with a county, whether it's with an intermediate unit, whether it's with an athletic conference, whether it's the whole state in general. And they've had state subcommittee meetings about this as well. I can offer those insights, but it's hard for me to project how much cost would be involved in the exploration. I think if we were to explore the high school schedule, your costs, I think that I would think of off the top of my head would be money for substitutes, for people to go out and do site visitations, the time that you would ask people to meet. If you did hire a consultant, which I don't think is a deal breaker, whether you would have to go in that direction, especially given the expertise that we've already garnered in this area. The exploration itself, I don't know, would be super costly. Some of the things that you may end up recommending, then you get into your phase 2, that's where the cost.
Right, so there is a cost that does extend to taxpayers to do this study. Whether it's minimal or whether it's large, we don't know yet, right? But there's a cost there. The other thing is every hour that somebody in this administration is working on this study, that's an hour that they're not doing what they typically do without this approval of the study. So those are important parameters to understand because, but here we go. If the administrator, and I think part of the thing is administration doesn't want to say no to a board member. So if a board member asks you, do you have the bandwidth to do this? You don't want to say no, right? Or do you? Because we do want to, and I agree with you. I do like a piece, and I can agree with something that everybody said around this table. But there's elements that I don't necessarily agree to, as everybody around this table doesn't agree with. I agree a lot with Mr. Tate talking about doing this in coordination with other districts in the county. I think that that's very important. I also recall a conversation that we had where you indicated that you got to start with the premise of competence. And I think that that's where the conversation goes to talk to the administration of, do you have the bandwidth to do that? We want to start with the premise that you have the competence and understanding, because we believe that. So if you're trying to get me to a yes.
I just wanted to, I'm not trying to convince you to do anything. I wanted to give you a second opportunity after having gone around, because I'm going to go to Ms. Stone as well for clarification.
Right.
So I could give the administration their head nod or not head nod.
Well, I think, yeah. But,
or the count of head nods. I'm sure Dr. Sanko's keeping notes, but.
And maybe I think that this is going around the table asking for a head nod is clearly, at least by me, been misunderstood. Going around the table to ask for discussion pieces, I think, is appropriate for where this is. So that's where some of the confusion comes around, is going around. You're right, we're going around the table to have a discussion, but when you're asked to go around the table to give a head nod, that's very different.
We've done it multiple times through many committee meetings for all things, for the initial discussion. So we don't waste the administration's time if 6 months from now, they come back and present and say, oh, well, no, we're not going to support that. So that would be a waste of time, right? So the head nods are, in a way, in an essence, so they know to start this work, so at least there's some interest. And along this way, they will present and we'll make those decisions. We've done it in every committee for any major decision.
We've done it toward the end of the conversation. We've looked around for head nods. I agree with that.
I'm not sure I agree with that.
Typically don't start with the beginning of the head nod, and particularly when we're conflating several things together.
Okay, well,
That's why I was trying to advise to decouple these things, to be a little bit more specific on what I'm providing a head nod for.
All right, so for clarification purposes, I think it's pretty clear from the presentation and the discussion. So administration is looking for further exploring the high school schedule with a subcommittee of later set times. That is what I see is presented. That is what I've been hearing. I know Mr. Tate wants to speak.
That's what happens.
I just have one question.
Mr. Hickey does, and then I want to get back to Ms. Stone because she was the only other one, so I could kind of summarize this so we could move on and continue. I know there's going to be continued discussions regardless whether or not there's exploration or not. So Mr. Tate, Mr. Hickey, Ms. Stone, and then Mr. Hidalgo.
So I'll be as brief as I can because the hour's late. We've had a long discussion and I thought it was appropriate to go to the head nods at this point after a long discussion, and we've discussed the high school schedule previously. So number one, a blank check, that's a straw man. The board approves every contract that the district engages in. If the administration said, we want to hire a consultant to come in and talk with us about the high school schedule or the start time, this board would vote on the contract. There's no such thing as a blank check. It doesn't work that way. The idea of an open black hole, I mean, that's absurd. We've heard complaints that people don't have a voice, that we've pushed forward things without the full board's involvement. Now we're going around the table and asking for head nods, and the suggestion is that that's not the right way to do it. I don't know how to move forward without getting a sense of the will of the board. Does the board want to explore the high school schedule and start times or not? Now, if we get stuck, I would have no objection to decoupling the start time and the high school schedule. I'm okay with that. I think it's efficient and smart to look at them together, but if we can't move forward without voting on those separately, I'm fine with that. And the last thing I'll say is, the suggestion was that the board shouldn't be communicating that the schedule and the curriculum are conflated, that they're the same thing. No one's ever communicated that. All I want to do is look at the high school schedule that we haven't touched for decades. The amount of decisions that we have facing us is really pretty staggering. Yes, we have a master plan to develop. Yes, we have changes in curriculum mandated by the state. Yes, we have X, Y, and Z. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but you know, I just feel like I would be embarrassed to say to a parent who said, why haven't you touched the high school schedule? Well, we've got too much on our plate. I'm not willing to do that. The administration, the last thing I'll say, and I promise the last thing, the administration says no. I've had multiple conversations with Dr. Sanko where I've said, do you think that this makes sense? And he will say, no, and here's why. Dr. Sanko, our administration is not afraid to say no. If they thought that this was a bad idea to try to move forward on the high school schedule exploration at this point, they would say no, I'm sure of it. Because I've asked Dr. Sanko several times if this was a bad idea, to put it simply. And he had plenty of opportunity to say to me, it's a bad idea. And I haven't heard that. So I think it's our responsibility to look at the high school schedule.
Mr. Hickey.
I'll agree partially with Mr. Tate, Mr. Stone. If we're going to do it, but I would actually like to see them separated personally. But my question is because.
Wait, what would you like to see separated, the vote or the?
No, the issues. One, start time, one, the schedule. Because I do think they're two different things. What goes on between the hours of 8 and 4, that changes all the time. I would like to see, if we're going to do it, I would say let's look at high school scheduling as one and look at start times as another, because I think one is a lot easier than the other. The question that I'll ask, because as everybody alludes to, that the administration does put their foot down, and my concerns, I heard them before, but the question that I'll ask to you is, at this time, as we, had it not been brought to your attention about exploring these two issues, would you have brought these issues to the attention of the board at this time? Like I said, my concern is the whole thing about, is right now while we're having these other things. I'm not saying 3 months from now, I have a different, I might have a whole different look on these things. But had it not been brought to you said that you weren't the one who initiated this idea. You didn't come to the board and, during your pre-meeting and say, hey, I would like to talk about the early start times and block scheduling. Had it not been brought to your attention, would you have brought it to our attention at this time?
Again, I would say as one person of the two issues, the high school schedule is one, and certainly I have personal experience being the high school principal formerly for 15 years, that I think would be ripe for further exploration. Did I answer your question?
No, but I'll let it go with that.
So you recommended the committee?
No, my question was, would you have brought it to our attention if we didn't bring it to yours? At this time, as of, the February 27th, or whatever.
I don't, again, scope and sequence, I don't know if the timing would have aligned perfectly, but high school schedule is something that would definitely have been on the radar for exploration.
And we talked about it in December. I don't know why it was brought up then, but it was on the schedule in December, if you remember.
Then I'll consider it on my radar.
All right, I'm gonna go back to Ms. Stone.
Well, like I said, if the administration says they have the time and they want to investigate, then I don't see why, if it's not a cost, and I know we have all these other things on our plate, but Al specifically is not involved in the full-day kindergarten. He's not specific.
That's all Nicole.
Did you know that?
Yeah.
But, it's, if he says that he said it originally that he's excited about looking into it. So as I said before, if the administration wants to do it, then I say go to it. Doesn't mean they have to look into it at 90 miles an hour at the pace that they can deal with it, then look into it. And Al already said he wants a subcommittee for start time, which means to me, he is kind of looking at them separately. And the only point I'll make to you, Mike, is it's not about how many hours the kids sleep. The scientific studies, and there's many of them, I'll send them to you, it's about sleeping later in the morning. It's a bioclock thing. It's not about how many hours sleep.
I'm very.
And they
All right, Ms.
learn
Stone, can we
better.
have that conversation after the meeting, so.
That's it. So that's it.
Okay, so Ms. Oseki had her hand, wait, no, Ms. Hidalgo, and then Ms. Oseki, and then we have our head nods for the sake of, but I
Sure,
will.
so I'm just gonna go back to the head nods. When I originally looked around the room, I'm pretty much sure that Mrs. Stone was, all about start times, but she wasn't doing the schedule. That was really clear. You can go back and listen. You weren't happy with that. You said, I'll come back to you. Can I, hold on, no, sorry, it's gonna get a little bit crazier. It's getting a little crazier now.
I said it was up to the administration, that was their decision. It's an educational decision.
All right, so it could have been my.
I left it.
I'll clarify then. My perception is that you were all about school start times for the Arcadia clock. Hold on, and then, but you weren't really interested in the scheduling. But what I also want to get an answer from, since this is a public meeting, Ms. Horner had a very pointed question, which I thought was fantastic. And what it revealed is that board members went to Mr. Funk and asked him about this schedule. And it was dead silence. And then Mr. Funk did say that board members came to him to put it on there. So we've been really having this since you guys all been on the board, me worried about the transparency. So I'm gonna give you the chance now to just go ahead and say, whose idea was it to put it on the schedule for tonight? Because again, as to try to clarify for everybody, what Mr. Roosevelt said was you led with head nods. Now, we also did that for kindergarten, right? But I was for kindergarten, so I was a yes for kindergarten, no problem. But why don't you go ahead and just let's be honest, because if someone asked me, yes, I was the one that went to the administration because I want to get this on this and put it on there. So why so much silence? Can someone please tell me, because this is a board of 9, who decided to go to the administration and say we want this on the agenda today? It's pretty obvious, maybe, but I won't know. Can someone please say?
I'm sorry?
Can we just talk about what we're?
I can ask Mr. Funk.
How about you want to go around and ask each person?
Oh, no, then I'll stop. I'll ask Mr. Funk, who came to you and asked you?
I'm sorry, Mr. Hidalgo.
I'm asking you.
I gave you the opportunity to ask your question.
I'm asking the question to Dr. Stanko.
Come on, Joe,
That is so inappropriate.
What's inappropriate is that you guys are putting them on the spot.
We're not.
We're putting them on the spot.
You are. And
Because you're not asking, okay. then
we have
who's-
people here that would like to speak too.
Is this a free-for-all? Because I could
It's
jump
not,
in.
it's not, that's why I just said I'm waiting for Ms. Oseki to speak. I don't understand this.
Well, then,
I'll
did you, who decided to put this on the agenda?
Mr.
You
Hidalgo,
were-
you got to answer, you got to ask your question, so I'm gonna let Ms.
My-
Oseki speak.
My
Somebody
concern
on this
here
thing- no, it's not a
is
concern.
that,
You can answer the question.
if we say that we have too much on our plate, I just want to remind everybody that like these things are cyclical. Like a lot of the things that were brought up, the full day kindergarten, that'll be over, I mean, that's over and,
Ethical group I've ever been on in my life.
that'll be over, in the fall when our full day kindergartners join our district, and that'll be kind of behind us. And then the union negotiations and that stuff, that's all cyclical. So, when we're undertaking this to take 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I don't know why we wouldn't get started. There's always going to be negotiations. There's always going to be facilities that need to be renovated. I mean, nobody's saying we need to rush anything.
All right, thank you. So after all of that conversation and discussion, I did get a 5-4.
Okay.
Okay? And we will move on.
I just want to jump in a little bit here because I think that.
I'm sorry, so, Mr. Roosevelt?
I'm not allowed to speak?
I was just waiting for you to be recognized. This is the way we've always run the meetings.
We haven't
so-
always run it. This meeting is an example of that. There's been multiple times.
Well, I don't control people just yelling out. I was trying to get, which it was, and
I
then
know.
you just spoke out again and then called, stating that the meeting wasn't under
So
control.
some members can shout out and others can't.
I
Is that
stopped-
what we're doing? Look,
Okay.
I think that this is an example of exactly what the community doesn't want to see. And I think this meeting is an example of some of us hearing what we want to hear and some of us hearing what we don't want to hear. And I don't want to continue with disputation and all of this hostility. I think it's ineffective and I think it's embarrassing. But there's been several times that several board members have called me out, used my words and tried to twist them. And I don't think that that's a good way to start. I also don't think it's a good way to start. It's an easy way to blow meetings up and get people on edge. And if that's the intent, you're just going to get more of the same. So I don't want to continue with this, but I just want to point out that even with the head nod conversation, we're hearing what we want to hear or what we don't want to hear. Even with the understanding of whether this is a black hole or whether the administration wants to do this or doesn't want to do it. I haven't heard the administration say, it's going to cost this much, it's going to take this much time. Yes, we can do it, and yes, we want to do it. That's not the administration's fault. That's because all of us are hearing different things, whether it's positive or negative. And I think that it's important for us to listen very carefully to what each other say and not try to assume where we're going to go. I don't want to point fingers because I think that's just going to continue this. So we're trying to bring this back together, and that's a good way to start. So with that, I'm okay with looking at the high school schedule alone. But I think this meeting has also pointed out, like I tried to articulate, there's lots of things packed into this. And to get a nod to say, yes, the high school schedule that expands into other different areas, that's the area of the black hole. And if you don't hear that, if you hear something different, that's not, then come back to me nicely and collegiately. But to explode or to cause other board members to explode, I don't think is a good way to bring this board back together. Several people have discussed and remarked in meetings or after meetings, hey, we were doing so good, we were coming back together.
That's right.
And we were. And this is a way to blow it back up again. So if that's your intention, keep going, and I'll be happy to participate. But I don't want to do that. So I just wanted to encourage us to listen to each other and listen to the administration and listen to our constituents. And not only hear what we want to hear or only hear what we don't want to hear, because we're starting with the result instead of starting with why. That's
Okay.
all I have to say.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on.
So before Nicole goes to that slide, early in earlier tonight, Mr. Roosevelt asked for an average of kindergarten enrollment, and I was able to pull that up. But this is from 2021 through 2024. In 2021-22 school year, we had 496 kindergarten students. 22-23, we had 467. 23-24, 497, with an average of 486.6. And I'll work to get that 21-22 year out and replace it with the 24-25 year.
That concludes our
Thank you.
presentation for this evening. These are our upcoming topics for our agenda for the March 27th Education Committee meeting. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Public comment.
Thank you for those of you that are still in the audience, bearing with us at this late hour. So public comment, 3 minutes, if you could, hold to the 3 minutes. If you would please state your name and your township, and I will start on this side, and if you don't want to speak, then.
Daniel Houston, Northampton Township. I received an email last week stating that my son's linguistic support program was going to be split next year. K through 2 will be moving to Richborough Elementary, and 3 through 6 will stay at Holland until 3rd grade moves to middle school. So eventually we're moving the autistic support program from Holland Elementary altogether, transitioning to Richborough. I sat in this very room last year with parents from the ILS program in Holland. Their program was to be moved from Richborough to accommodate making space for full-day kindergarten. They brought up points about how they were already displaced from their home schools, how difficult it is for their children to make friends, transitions to a new school are so hard. Ultimately, ILS was told that they could stay at Holland. Surely families in the AS program feel the same, but as I read the email that I received, it didn't paint a full picture as to why autistic support was being moved. My email stated, and I quote, "This expansion will help us maintain small classroom sizes, offer individualized instruction, and ensure that all students receive the attention and resources they need to succeed." The program is being moved to Holland, or the program is being moved from Holland to Richborough. That's not expanding. The K through 2 classrooms in Holland will go to full-day kindergarten. So while my children's classroom sizes may change because of certain circumstances, it will not be smaller because there's now more rooms in Holland for autistic support. I've been vocal the last 3 years about the high number of children in the AS rooms and lack of staff to support such high numbers. As far as individualized instruction, I'm not even going to get into that because I only have my 3 minutes. But I've also been vocal the last 3 years about this as well. Still waiting on that academic curriculum for my autistic support program that my children are in, and I don't think putting that in place will be done any faster with half the program moving. The reason special education families seem to have a chip on their shoulder and maybe seem like they can never be pleased is because administration, at least from my personal experience, has never been completely honest with me. You're moving these kids like pieces of furniture and breaking up the bonds that have been formed within these families and segregating us once again. You're lying and telling families it's because of classroom sizes, instruction, and staffing, when the issue is you need room for full-day kindergarten, so someone needs to move. I shouldn't have to explain to special educators the importance of consistency and cohesiveness to a demographic of children like this. If K through 2 staff presumably moves with Richborough to the AS program, my nonverbal autistic children will walk into Holland come September with not one familiar face in terms of teachers or support staff. My one son's currently with a first grade AS classroom, so he'll also lose all his current classmates as well. This is the opposite of what you are telling people when you are creating these specialized programs in the district. You're dismantling an already segregated, small, understaffed program, and instead of just discussing it with all these families affected and getting their feedback on how it may impact their children, you're just sending me an email telling me what we're gonna do. Just an observation real quick, I looked at your intense full-day kindergarten schedule that you had up on that screen, and there was no allotted time for any teachers to talk, general education teachers to speak to their special education teachers about best practices and maybe inclusion opportunities. If the board put a fraction of the time discussing special ed as you just did exploring high school start times, I would die a happy woman. What I just witnessed here was so embarrassing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Laura Lorenzano, and I'm in Upper Makefield Township. Some of you have already heard from me before at one of the other meetings. I'm a strong supporter of block scheduling. I do believe, and by listening, they should be separate. They each have their own polarizing ideas, so 100% go that direction. Separate them, treat them individually. it's really important. There are a lot of parents, and I'm walking around telling everyone to kind of get behind it, learn something, decide for themselves if it's for the district or not. Make sure that you're considering not only the students and what it's going to do for them, but how you're going to talk to the parents, find out what they want. And there's a lot of unknowns just listening to the board right now. And that's okay. It's okay to be unknown, which it sounds like is the whole reason for approving the committee to move forward on this. So that's why we're doing it. It sounds to me like we're trying to get approval just for the committee alone. That's great. It's a great first step. I don't know why that would be difficult. I hope, and it sounds like we're moving forward with that. And we should, right? And just because it's busy, those are the everyday tasks of the board as with everything we do, whether it's work or home or whatever. Our life is very busy. We're gonna add one more thing in. It is not a quick process. I realize even for my own kids that they are not going to be probably realizing the benefit of it. But I know many kids who are down the line who will 100% realize the benefit. For me, I'm a little one-sided in the music department, so what kids does it help? For me, it's all about the music department. And kids who do music, they're trying to get into that. So let's say they're going into a freshman year, you probably hear this, why they want to drop the PE credit? Because they want to take band, they want to take orchestra or music or whatever. The last meeting in January, those kids that were in that group that were winning the, what do you call the award for the SAT, the PSAT? Those were the majority, those 50% of them were in the music program. It means something. Those kids, right? You get them into these programs. So just keep in mind that talk to the parents and the kids. These are the people that really matter. Are we trying to put it off because it's hard? It is going to be hard. It will. But that's why you're here, right? To make those hard decisions for us. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you all for coming.
I did have one thing I wanted to add because I didn't see it up there. I had sent you guys an email asking to request to put something on the agenda. And I just wanted to request to see if we could look into the needs of the reading and math specialists for the schools, for the students that really need that more assistance, especially in our elementary schools, please.
Okay. Thank you. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.